Type 2 Hero posted originally on the archive of our own at http://archive-of-our-own.org/work/19262302. By Mad_Nimrod summary. Izuku goes to UA with a disability and a shattered dream, but soon learns shattered things can still be fixed. With a TV tropes page. https://tvtropes.org/pmwiki/pmwiki.php/fanfic/type 2 hero quirkless and broken chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. One voice spoke. Another voice growled. The first voice reprimanded. The second voice yelled. The first voice yelled back. You're more like a villain than a hero. Then there was fire. There was pain. And the first voice screamed. Izuku woke up sweating and gasping for air. He lay in bed and regained his bearings. Judging from the fact his mom wasn't bursting into his room, he must not have screamed in his sleep. That was lucky. He didn't want to disturb her again over a stupid dream. Not a dream. After a moment he felt pain in his left shoulder. He winced and quietly cried as he gripped his left shoulder. His scarred, aching shoulder that was missing an arm. It hurts. Realizing the time, he quickly got up and got dressed. With almost a year's practice behind him, he managed to get dressed in the UA uniform with minimal hassle. Never did get the tie right though. Looking himself over in the mirror, he quickly wiped his tears before heading down for breakfast. His mother, the sweet woman she was, greeted him with a hug before fixing his tie for him. Izuku gave a bit of a tired chuckle as she did. Izuku and his mom ate breakfast in silence before he grabbed his satchel. It was a bit of a hassle using a shoulder bag, but it was impossible to wear a backpack with only one arm. As he stood up from the table, Inko noticed the pained look on his face. Are you sure you want to go today? She asked. I'm fine with you staying home another day or two if Mom, today's the first D-day of school. Izuku laughed through his stutter. I see can't miss the first day, especially the first D-day at UA. That'd just be embarrassing. Giving his mom a quick half hug, Izuku dashed out the door. Inko gave a soft sigh as she cleaned up the dishes. Izuku was smiling, but she could tell it was mostly a mask. She teared up a bit. When was the last time you really smiled, Izuku? Izuku walked down the street, taking in the morning air and occasionally moving his satchel a bit. The morning was relatively quiet and devoid of villains, it seemed. No one paid any attention to him, and he was careful not to bump into anyone either. He really didn't want to deal with anyone this morning. He was nearing the train station before a red car stopped next to him. Izuku briefly wondered if this was another tourist who needed directions, but was surprised to recognize the driver as they rolled their window down. Yo, Kamui Woods greeted, still in uniform. KK Kamui. Izuku exclaimed. Didn't, how are you doing? The usual, the hero chuckled at Izuku's stuttering. Heading to UA, right? Want a ride? The thought of riding in a car with a pro hero, especially Kamui Woods, made Izuku turn red from nervousness and flail his arm while speaking complete gibberish. I couldn't, he finally replied. I mean, why you're a pro and on DD duty and I'm off the clock, Kamui interrupted before gesturing to the empty passenger seat. Come on, I've been wanting to chat anyways. With no choice but to admit defeat, Izuku went around the car and nervously sat in the passenger seat. Kamui drove towards UA and, thankfully, waited a bit before talking. He mostly asked about how Izuku's daily life had been, how his physical therapy was going, casual things like that. Izuku was glad for that. Nothing about his old school, nothing about the incident. In less time than the train, Kamui pulled up to the gates of UA. As Izuku thanked him and opened the door, the pro hero put his hand on Izuku's shoulder. Listen, kid. UA isn't like your old school. The teachers there will help you if anything happens. If anyone hassles you, tell one of them, okay? Izuku just gave a quiet nod before exiting the car and heading inside. Izuku looked up at UA. He had only been here once before for the entrance exam, so the sight of it was still amazing in his eyes. With a small smile, he dashed in to find his class. With the hustle and bustle of the first day, no one really noticed him. He was thankful for that. He didn't want to be judged for his disability on the first day. Giving a sigh of relief, he found his class quickly. Scooting in quietly, he sneaked past the other students to a desk close to the window, obscuring his left shoulder from sight. Pulling out his notebook, he wrote in it quietly while waiting for the teacher. The wait wasn't long. There was a crack as their teacher smacked the podium to get everyone's attention. Izuku looked up in disbelief. He had heard UA's teachers were all pro heroes, but seeing it with his own eyes was something else. Though, he did wonder how this teacher got away with their current outfit. Good morning, class. Midnight smiled as the students got to their seats. Welcome to Class 1C, General Education. Chapter End Note. So, what do you think? Happy face. I know it seems a bit down now, but trust me, things will quickly start looking up for our lil protagonist. Sorry if the chapter seems short, I suck at making first chapters. Sweating face. Also, if you're still looking for, hopefully, interesting things, I've also been posting another FIC on a joint account called Cobalt Star. https://archivo4own.org/work/167484225/chapters/39291160. Me and a friend are working on that one, but Type 2 Hero is my own baby. It might not be updated regularly, but I promise it will be finished. Till next time. Broken and helping chapter notes. You want fluff? You get fluff. See the end of the chapter for more notes, and that'll be your class schedule for the year. Midnight finished as she closed the folder on the podium. Now, today is technically a half day, but we still got time before you kids can head home, so I'm giving you all permission to explore the school grounds. Stay out of trouble, stay out of the way, and if nothing else, stay out of the principal's office. Good. Good. Dismissed. With that closing word, the students of Class 1C got up and shuffled for the door. Izuku lingered a bit longer to finish the current sentence in his notebook. Midnight's orientation to the class took a little more than an hour, but due to everyone paying attention he didn't get to see too many quirks in use by his classmates. Some were more obvious, such as the small boy with mouse ears and a tail, but overall the kids in his class looked normal enough. Izuku was eager to see what their quirks were, but too nervous to actually approach any of them to ask. He'd just have to wait for them to be used. Closing his notebook, Izuku slid it into his satchel before getting up and heading for the door. Wait a minute, kid, Midnight called out just before he stepped out. Izuku froze. Did he do something wrong? Was he in trouble? It was barely an hour into the first day. What could he wait? What if she knew he was quirkless? Was she gonna get on him for that? Was this gonna be a repeat of his thoughts were interrupted when he felt a pair of hands gently grab his shoulders and spin him around. He looked up into Midnight's scrutinizing gaze, frozen in fear. He watched as she looked him up and down, then smiled. You're Inko-san's kid, aren't you? She asked. Why you know am I my mom? Izuku asked nervously. Recognize those eyes anywhere. Midnight smiled bigger. And yep, I know your mom. We've been friends since she was a student here, though we haven't talked in forever, kinda my fault there. She stopped talking when she saw Izuku's eyes widen. Am I my mom at T-tended UA? Izuku gasped, giving a deeper one when Midnight nodded her affirmation. This was news to the stuttering young man. His mom might not have spoken a lot about her past, but why wouldn't she talk about attending UA, knowing her son wanted to go there too? You'll have to ask her the details, Midnight said as she quickly scribbled something onto a small note card before kissing it and giving it to Izuku. Bewildered, he accepted the card and gasped when he saw it had her signature and a phone number along with the lipstick from the kiss. My personal number, kid. Anyone messes with you at all, call me. If anything bigger happens and you can't contact your mom, call me. Okay. She gently ruffled his hair as he nodded, tears in his eyes. Just like that, his first hour at UA was better than the whole 3 years at Aldera Junior High. Pocketing the note, he gave a deep bow before leaving the classroom. Midnight gave a smile as he left. Don't worry, Shimu-chan, Midnight whispered to herself, I'll help keep him safe. Izuku raced down the hall, his hand on his satchel. If he memorized the school map correctly, the support course workshop shouldn't be much further. He had filled out a request form for a certain object not long after receiving his acceptance letter. Due to the nonviolent nature of the object, his request was accepted, and he was told it would be ready by the first day of school. He just had to grab it from the workshop himself. He smiled as he saw the metal double doors of the work boom. Both doors slammed open from a sudden explosion. The shockwave might have knocked Izuku off his feet had he not tensed up the instant he heard the noise. Only little smoke billowed out, but it was followed by a coughing girl with pink hair, soot-covered goggles, and singed clothes. Okay, the girl laughed as she pushed her goggles up, revealing yellow eyes that seemed to have crosshairs in them, maybe a little too much juice in that one. Better tone it down for the next test. Then she turned and saw Izuku standing not too far from the door. He had not moved since the explosion occurred. Hey there, little guy, she exclaimed as she hopped over to the shorter greenette. Didn't see ya there. I didn't hit ya with any. Her words dropped as she noticed he didn't jerk or scoot back when she leaned her face close to his. Her smile dropped when she saw the look in his eyes. Those weren't the eyes of someone who was startled from a random noise. Those eyes, still focused on the doors, were the eyes of someone frozen in primal terror. Hey, she said in a quieter, calmer tone as she gently tapped his shoulder. Hey, are you alright? The sudden contact on his left shoulder startled him from his stupor. He looked around a moment before his gaze settled on Hatsum. Wiping a few tears from his eyes, he looked up at her with a nervous smile. Sorry, he stuttered, I'm fine, really. She gave a frown, clearly not believing his words as her hand gently squeezed his left shoulder. She looked at his shoulder, clearly noticing it was missing something. Izuku winced as she did this, certain she was gonna say something about his arm. Instead, her eyes lit up and she looked at him with a bigger smile. You're Midoriya-kun, right? She asked. The one who requested that desk thing, right? Surprised by the sudden cheerfulness, Izuku only nodded before the girl pulled him close and dragged him towards the workshop. Awesome. I'm Hatsume, and they had me work on it as an extra credit thing after the entrance exam. True, a genius like me doesn't need extra credit, but it was fun to work on. Did you come up with the basic design yourself? Pretty smart, green bean. The support student kept jabbering on, not letting Izuku get a word in edgewise, which he was completely fine with, as she pulled him towards a large workbench that was already charred black and had a flaming something on top. Hatsum casually grabbed the burning device and tossed it into a nearby can, eliciting another pop, which made Izuku jump, before grabbing a large metal case off the floor and setting it on the bench. She gave a chuckle before flipping the tabs and opening it. Inside was what looked like a few metal bars connecting a polished wood plank to something that looked like a harness. Hatsum pulled it out with ease, gently pushing Izuku back a step before slowly lowering the apparatus onto his shoulders. There were a few curved and padded bars on his shoulders, with the rest of the device resting against his stomach. Despite all the metal, the object was fairly light, a fact the 150 centimeters tall boy was thankful for. After helping him buckle it into place, Hatsum stepped back and let Izuku try it out. At first the wooden plank was resting against his stomach, but Izuku grabbed the corner and spun it clockwise, from his perspective, until the corner was next to his chin. Then he slowly pushed the plank forward, hearing the gears click as it rotated forward before coming to a rest in front of his chest. He rested his right arm on it, noting it seemed a little high before Hatsum tweaked the bars on his shoulders a bit to lower the wooden plank until it was at a comfortable height. Have I mentioned how clever this design is, Mido-chan? Hatsum asked as she stepped back to admire the device. I was a bit curious why you wanted a carry-it-yourself desk, but after seeing you in person I get it. Now let me show you some alterations I made myself. She gave a smile as Izuku watched her push a small button on the edge. There was a loud click as a small panel flipped up, revealing a small compartment close to his wrist. A spot to carry pencils and erasers. It's spring-loaded so you don't gotta worry about batteries. You will need batteries for the other side, though. That button flips up a small clock that gives the time, temperature, humidity, anything you'd need to know for outside writing. Now, I know the place you're actually gonna do the writing is slanted and all, but I also took the liberty of adding a little ridge around it so you won't get any books wet if you accidentally spill a drink outside it. It's also made from mahogany and the bars are rust-resistant, so. Hatsum stopped when she noticed Izuku was just staring with tears streaming from his eyes. This is amazing, he cried. More than I ever thought. He quickly wiped his eyes and gave Hatsum a wide smile. Thank you. Hatsum gave a big smile of her own before enthusiastically patting his shoulder. Don't thank me yet, Mido-chan. You can't take this thing off school grounds yet. Apparently the principal wants to see it used and possibly have a few more made for future disabled students, but once you can take it outside, be sure to tell folks it was made by the great Hatsume, got it? Izuku gave a happy nod and Hatsum laughed before pushing him towards the door. See you later, runt. Don't be shy about coming here, I want to know any more clever ideas you get. And bring that thing back here before you leave for the day. She grinned as she watched Izuku almost skip out of the workshop. Yeah, he was gonna be a fun guy to hang with. However, she mentally noted she'd have to tone down any possible explosions when he was around. She could recognize PTSD a mile away, even without her quirk. The half-day was almost over, and Izuku had spent the entire time familiarizing himself with the school. He didn't really visit any of the places for the 2nd and 3rd-year students, but even then the campus was large enough it took hours to really look at everything. Something that really surprised Izuku was how there weren't too many limitations on where students could go. Since UA was a hero school, Izuku assumed there would be places the other courses weren't allowed to visit, but it really seemed like no one cared who went where, other than a few facilities for the hero course. The biggest surprise, however, were the other students. At his old school, Izuku had seen other students get harassed or questioned for not having obvious quirks, and he knew those students would bully someone missing a limb like he was. Instead, the other students he had seen here had let him pass without hassle, and it wasn't out of being ignored. Izuku knew what it was like being ignored. On top of that, a few older students had actually approached to ask if he needed help with anything. It was a stark contrast to his old school. After a while, Izuku went outside, choosing to rest a bit on a small hill overlooking a PE field. God, even the grass here felt so comfy. Did one of the teachers have a landscaping quirk? He would not have been surprised if there was one. He leaned back and closed his eyes, enjoying the breeze. Then something hit him in the chest. He jerked up, heart racing as he looked around. Finding no one else in the vicinity, Izuku sighed and looked down at what hit him. It looked like a baseball, but had some weird stuff attached to it. Maybe the baseball club was doing tryouts. They'd probably want this back. Thinking about how the ball hit him, Izuku picked it up and walked in the direction he hoped it came from. After a few minutes, he reached another part of the field and saw a large group of students about 100 meters away from the hill he walked on. Even from this distance he could see none of them had baseball bats. Maybe they weren't the baseball club. Izuku watched them for a few minutes as they all took turns throwing different balls, making Izuku feel a bit silly about bringing back the one that hit him, and noting they were all using their quirks as a shaggy-looking older man watched. Wait a minute. This was a quirk assessment. That meant hero course. Izuku gasped, dropping the ball. Quickly sitting down and folding his desk back down, Izuku pulled out a new notebook and started writing. He was too far away to get the finer details of some of the students, but they all had a huge variety of quirks that he could see. He noted one purple-haired boy handed a huge guy with a lot of arms the ball to throw, while another girl threw her ball using her vine-like hair, and holy crap, that girl made a cannon. The noise of the cannon made Izuku flinch a bit, but it was thankfully far enough away that he didn't freeze up again. Izuku watched them for around 30 minutes before the assessment came to an end. Izuku was a bit sad by this, as he hadn't been able to get all of their quirks down. He could guess for quite a few, but some of them, like that girl who might have had long earlobes, were too indistinct to figure out. At the end, the man who had to be the teacher said something that made the shorter boy with grape-like hair cry out. Izuku didn't know what sort of horror that boy was told, but judging from how the boy had just latched onto the cannon girl's leg and appeared to be trying to stuff his face into her but while flailing around, he didn't feel too bad about it. Soon after that the teacher grabbed the purple midget and carried him away while the other students began the trek back to the main building. Izuku wondered which hero class they were. From what quirks he had figured out, he was sure he could devise a way for some of them to improve themselves. Of course, that was assuming they'd listen to him. Everyone else he'd met today might have been nice to him, but for all Izuku knew the hero course students might be elitist and not listen to a disabled quirkless runt like him. Suddenly the hairs on the back of his neck stood up and Izuku turned around. To his surprise, he saw the shaggy teacher from earlier behind him. Judging from how the man was crouched, he must have been sneaking up on Izuku. And judging from the tweak of his eyebrows, he must have been surprised Izuku noticed him. Izuku looked over his appearance once and gasped. "Why, you're Eraserhead," he exclaimed. Another twitch from the older gentleman. "Yes," Eraserhead affirmed, "and who are you?" Izuku quickly scrambled through his pockets and pulled out his ID, handing it to the pro-hero. "I'm Midoriya Izuku, sir. CC Class 1C, General Education, sir." Eraserhead looked over the ID, making sure it was legitimate, before handing it back to Izuku. "Alright, now what are you doing here?" The pro-hero watched as Izuku slowly and shakily reached down to pick up the ball from earlier, holding it out. This hit me while I was resting on a hill over Thataway," Izuku explained. I thought it might have BB belonged to a C club, so I came to return it, BB, but saw you and your C class instead. I saw why you were doing a QQ quirk assessment and DD decided to take notes." "Notes?" Izuku quickly handed his notebook to Eraserhead, who took it and paged through it slowly. As he did, his eyes narrowed. Oh God, was he angry? It's a hobby of mine, Eraserhead, SS sir, Izuku quickly clarified. I like to take notes on heroes and their Q quirks. I originally did it to prepare to become a hero myself, but... He subconsciously rubbed his left shoulder and teared up. Am I in TT trouble, sir? I swear, I am careful with my NN notes, and I never show them to people, and kid, breathe, Eraserhead finally stated. I'm not mad. There is a lot in here, however. How long were you watching us? 30 minutes, sir, the green-haired boy replied after checking the clock on his desk. And what's your quirk? Izuku looked down and teared up more at this question. I am quirkless. There was a short, awkward silence. You're telling me, Eraserhead asked, that you're quirkless and managed to figure out this much in only a half hour? A nod from Izuku as more tears fell. Kid, cheer up. I'm not mad. If anything, I'm honestly impressed. Izuku looked back up at him as he flipped back through the pages. To get so much from such a short observation time from this distance without a quirk, it's damn impressive. He closed the notebook and read the title. Number 15. You have 14 more of these. Kinda, the greenette nervously chuckled. And number 14 DD doesn't have much in it yet B because it's gonna be about my C classmates, B but I got 13 more F filled out. I said you could calm down, Eraserhead looked at him. No need to stutter. C can't help it. I've been stuttering since. Izuku rubbed his shoulder again. DD doctor said it's linked to TT trauma. D to know how long it'll last. There was a few more moments of silence before the pro hero held up the notebook. Mind if I borrow this tonight? And think you could bring the first 13 to school tomorrow? Izuku's eyes widened before the teacher continued, no, you're not in trouble, stop thinking you are. I just know a teacher here who might like to see these. He likes brainy kids like you, even if he honestly terrifies half the staff. Why you think he'd wanna see my stuff? If anything, Eraserhead chuckled, he'd feel rather put out if he didn't see this. We won't damage the books at all, and they'll be returned at the end of the day. Sound good? Izuku quickly nodded in reply, and the hero gave a grin. Good. Now, get going kid. Day's almost over. Also, for the record, you can call me Aizawa. Izuku's eyes widened more, just how wide could those things go, before nodding and running for the main building. The pro hero watched him go before flipping through the notebook again. Inko was busy setting the table for a late lunch. She knew Izuku would be home any minute, and would be needing either comfort food or celebration food. She was praying it was the latter. She didn't know how the staff would treat her son, since quirkless kids weren't allowed at UA when she was attending. She heard Kayama Namuri was a teacher there, but still. I'm home. Izuku called as he stepped into the apartment. Inko turned to greet him, but stopped when she actually saw him. This morning he was downcast and quiet. When he came home he had a shine in his eyes and a smile, a genuine smile, on his face. It was such a drastic difference Inko was almost brought to tears. How was your day, sweetie, she asked. It looks like you had a good one. It was amazing, Mom, he beamed as he gave her his trademark half-hug. I didn't talk to too many PP people, B but the people I did talk to were all so nice. And no one harassed me F for being quirkless. The teacher F for the hero course is the Eraserhead. Inko smiled as Izuku continued to chatter about his day, just enjoying the honest smile on his face. Just one day, and UA had changed his mood so much. Maybe it would help him, after all. And my homeroom teacher is Midnight. Also, she said she knows you. Inko froze for a moment in surprise before laughing. Oh my, she is. Good for you both. And yes, I know her. I'll tell you all about it later. How is she as a teacher? She's pretty good, Izuku nervously chuckled as he fished through his pockets. Then again, it's only the first day. She also gave me her number FF for an emergency C contact. He held out the card in question and Inko took it. That's good. So long as she didn't kiss it like she does 4-. Inko stopped when she saw the lipstick on the card. Izuku was confused as Inko kept smiling while the air around her seemed to darken. Before long, she slowly looked toward the door. I'm gonna kill her. What? I'm gonna use my quirk to rip her - Mom, stop. Izuku comically exclaimed. At the same time Izuku was trying to keep his mom from killing her old friend for reasons he still did not understand, Aizawa was sitting in a particular office. In front of him was the teacher he told Izuku about. Said teacher was carefully paging through Izuku's notebook, going over the notes he took on Class 1A. And he took all this down in 30 minutes? Nedzu asked. No quirk either, Aizawa nodded. That kid has one of the most analytical minds I have ever seen. I'm honestly looking forward to the other books, Nedzu chuckled while sipping tea. Who is this student anyways? Closing the notebook, the principal read the name on the front cover. His face scrunched up a bit the instant he read the name. Midoriya. Small, green, missing an arm. You're familiar with him? Aizawa asked. His name has crossed my desk a few times in the past. The rat/bear/thing took another sip before handing the book back to Aizawa. The real question, though, is what you plan on doing if his other notebooks are just as good as this. Nedzu was certain of what Aizawa's decision was. If he's as good as we think, Aizawa stated, I want to put his name forward to receive Type 2 training. Chapter end notes. What do you think? Was it good? Please tell me it was good. XD comments give me life, you know. For people wondering at the height discrepancy around Midoriya, I figure that his time training with All Might and Cannon might have resulted in a growth spurt, so I figured the lack of that combined with the trauma of losing his arm in the past would have made him not really grow much. For the desk harness, I tried to describe it best I could, I hope none of you got miffed about it. I tried to think of a college-style desk with braces on his shoulders so the weight is on those and not his neck or nothing like that. Also, for the folks that ain't figured it out yet, I bet the quirk assessment in this chapter was a hint at a certain occurrence, or rather lack of occurrence. Can you figure it out? XD to know how soon I gonna get the next chapter up, wanna work on Cobalt Star, but I am gonna be moving forward with this too, so see you later. Helping and chosen chapter notes I am on a roll. Will likely slow down soon, though. XD also, apologies in advance, but there's gonna be a bit of a long segment going over the 1C classmates and their quirks. Each student will have their moment to shine. See the end of the chapter for more notes. It was Izuku's second day of high school. He had taken the train to school today, and got a few pitying looks from other passengers, but he didn't notice. He was both excited and nervous about the oncoming school day. It would technically be the first time he and his class would be together, giving him more time to learn their quirks, and more time for them to learn his quirklessness. He knew yesterday was actually rather nice, but what if that was a one-time deal? He didn't really get to know his classmates yesterday, so what if they were like his old classmates? Izuku quickly shook his head. He knew his paranoia was well-founded, but he had to give them a chance. Besides, Midnight promised to help if things got dicey, and that made things immediately better than his old school. He just had to keep hoping things would stay better. Pushing past the nervousness of potential bullying, Izuku was now nervous over another matter. Inside the satchel that hung from his shoulder were his first 13 hero analysis books. This was the first time he had more than 2 on him at a given point, and he was gonna lend them all to Aizawa, aka Eraserhead, to show to another teacher. What was gonna happen? He believed Aizawa when he said he wasn't mad, but what did he have planned for these books? The train soon came to a stop, and Izuku quickly disembarked and continued to UA. Rushing down the road, the quirkless teen reached the gates fairly quickly. To his surprise, Aizawa was waiting at the gates. The teacher was looking at the students as they came in, looking absolutely bored. The moment he spotted Izuku, his gaze sharpened a bit and he gestured for the teen to come closer. Izuku nervously approached as he opened his bag. Aizawa watched as he carefully pulled out the notebooks and handed them over. Please be careful with them, Izuku asked. Some have seen some action, if you know what I mean. Aizawa quirked an eyebrow as he saw the singed number 13, but decided not to ask. I'll be careful, he nodded. Head to class, kid. Depending on what the other teacher thinks about these, you might get called away during lunch. And before you think it, no matter what happens, you're not in trouble. Got it? With a nod from Izuku, Aizawa stepped aside and let him dash inside. And you got some free time before your next class, Midnight smiled from the podium, so you can use this time to socialize for a bit. I need to grab something real quick, so don't burn the classroom down. She gave a wink before stepping out. The instant the door closed, the students all turned to each other and began talking. Many students got up to walk around, but Izuku stayed at his desk, writing what he could see about his classmates. He was mostly working on finishing touches for some of the things he learned yesterday when he noticed a shadow overhead. Hey there, a boy said from above. I noticed you're kinda quiet. You alright? Izuku slowly looked up and saw the source of the voice was a normal-looking guy with short brown hair and blue eyes. He almost looked plain enough to be a slice-of-life anime protagonist. I am okay, Izuku responded. Just writing. What you writing? The boy asked, not a hint of hostility in his tone. Izuku was nervous, but slowly moved aside for the boy to see. He read a few lines before his eyes widened. Holy crap, you're writing about us? He might not have meant it, but the boy asked loud enough for some of the other students to hear. This made Izuku even more nervous. Please don't get mad, Izuku curled up a bit. Seeing their mistake, the boy waved his hands and scooted back a bit. No, we're not mad, I promise. I think it's actually pretty cool. Oh yeah, I forgot. My name is Tabata Shinichi. What's your name? Midoriya Izuku, the greenette replied, still a bit curled up as other students came closer. Hey, I remember that name, a girl with short black hair smiled. You're the kid that threw a bag at that one slimy bastard a year ago. Hit him square in the eye. You were so cool. No way. Another boy exclaimed, this one covered in long hair like a Wookiee. What are you doing in Gen Ed? That was total hero material back then. This question, while honestly motivational, made Izuku feel a bit sadder. Because I'm QQ quirkless. Izuku stuttered. The class fell silent at that. He knew it. They hated him now. They were gonna start bullying him and "You're amazing," everyone yelled with glee. Izuku straightened up from the sudden shout, noticing everyone was looking at him with huge smiles. "You fought that villain and made it into UA quirkless?" Tabata asked. Before Midoriya could reply, he turned to another male student who had long blue hair and 4 eyes, with 2 pairs of glasses, and asked, "Yoshio, when was the last time a quirkless kid entered UA?" "The last quirkless student of UA, Glasses Boy Yoshio explained in a robotic tone, entered the management course 10 years ago, graduated top of their class, beating even the hero students academically." "You're really cool," the small mouse boy Izuku saw yesterday squeaked from nearby. "Hey, you're writing about us, right?" the girl who first recognized Izuku asked. "You wanna know our quirks and stuff?" At this question, Izuku's eyes lit up and he nodded. The girl smiled and closed her eyes. The students closest to her gave shouts of surprise as she grew before their eyes, stopping at what Izuku guessed was around triple her previous size. "I'm Asano Ryoko," she introduced. "I have a gigantism quirk like him lady, but nowhere near as big." "Least that means you won't break any buildings," the Wookiee from earlier laughed as he and several other students approached Izuku. "Hey, slow down, everybody," Tabata said before anyone else could step forward. "Give the kid time to write, okay? We still got some time before class, after all." Izuku was floored at this. They didn't hate him for his quirklessness at all. They were all so friendly toward him. If he weren't focused on writing he might have started crying. For the rest of homeroom, and in the following classes, Izuku wrote down everything he could about his classmates. Asano Ryoko had a smaller-scale gigantism quirk, stopping at barely more than 3.5 meters. She had short black hair and violet eyes that glowed a bit whenever she used her quirk. Choji Ryanosuke was basically a real-life version of a Wookiee, standing around 180 centimeters tall and covered in long fur. Izuku noted that he loved water despite apparently having difficulty swimming. Tabata Shinichi was the protag boy who first approached Izuku. His quirk just let him unspoil food, which was perfect for his dream of entering culinary school. This quirk also meant he was the perfect weapon against date-rape drugs, which impressed Izuku immensely. The small blonde mouse boy was Oscar Mousequitz. Apparently his family moved to Japan along with the Draconis family, who were big-name businessmen from America. He had a tail and sharp hearing, but was almost as nervous as Izuku. Yoshio Keiji had 4 brown eyes and was apparently Tabata's lifelong friend. His quirk let him read incredibly fast and retain that information with absolute clarity, which made it embarrassing to learn he sucked at math. Sanada Kayano was a fairly tall girl with green hair and amber eyes. Her quirk let her shape-shift her head and neck to look like any other individual, real or fictional. She demonstrated this by turning her head into All Mights and singing California Girl. Gakushu Hifumi was a fat boy with red hair and a quirk that honestly spooked Izuku. He could turn his entire body two-dimensional, letting him slip through the tiniest of cracks despite his immense girth. One of the more curious students was Sakai Hibi. He was a giant snake. Literally. No one knew if he was a human with a snake quirk or a snake with an intelligence quirk, but whatever he had still got him attend UA, even if he had to use his mouth to write. Izuku was most impressed at how he wore the upper half of the school uniform without having shoulders, looking a bit like an old feudal lord. Hayashida Magoichi was a purple-haired womanizer. Apparently he had flirted with over 20 girls on the first day of high school, and they all rejected him despite his quirk of constantly smelling nice. Moriboshi Ayam was a sweet yet snarky girl with long white hair kept in a ponytail. To Izuku's surprise, her quirk let her create and manipulate ice. When Izuku asked why she wasn't in hero course, she smiled, making Izuku blush a bit. And stated she had no desire to become a hero. The unofficial class mom of 1C was a fairly tall red-eyed girl named Kaguro Kiana. Like Moriboshi, she had long white hair, but kept it in 2 braids instead. She had huge white wings and could fly with ease. The girl who sat behind Izuku was named Hojo Kimura. She had darker hair and green eyes, and her quirk was that her tongue could stretch out almost 3 meters. She couldn't shoot it out like a frog, but she could still control it like a tentacle. Katsura Miki was a quiet brunette girl who went to the same middle school as Izuku but never really met him. She wore a scarf over both eyes due to being blind, but her quirk let her see shapes and colors in place of people and animals. She also had slight empathic abilities, but only so far as someone's color would change depending on their mood. Gorogoro Mamoru was a stocky boy with calcified outgrowths on his body, like small stony spikes. He was strong and fairly nimble, but failed the practical hero exam by a few points. However, he did not let this get him down. The last student in the class was Oyaniko Fujikuro. Tall and lanky with a mess of blue hair, Oyaniko's quirk let him erect an energy shield that could block almost anything. However, he could not move while using the shield. Izuku made sure to talk to everyone at least once before lunch to get their basics recorded in his book. His prior trepidation had all but disappeared before second period, replaced with enthusiasm and light-hearted smiles. Tabata and Yoshio had apparently taken it upon themselves to become Izuku's new, bestest buddies, after seeing his nervousness earlier, but everyone in Class 1C were friendly with each other. Between the students who failed the hero exam and those who chose not to take it altogether, a sense of camaraderie began to form. They might not have been heroes, but no one in class let that get them down. I just noticed something, Izuku stuttered Yoshio and Tabata at the end of present mixed English class, just before lunch. Oh, our class only has SS16 students. Why do you think that is? We're Gen Ed, Sakai replied as he slithered by, carrying a book bag in his mouth. Gen Ed classes have always been smaller than the rest. I'm fine with that, though, Yoshio shrugged. 18 classmates is good for the other courses but too much for me. 20, Tabata corrected. 20 classmates. There was a short silence before Yoshio started chuckling, followed by the students around him. As they laughed, Present Mike checked his phone. What he read made him turn pale. Midoriya Izuku, he called out, silencing the classroom. Did you do something wrong? What? Izuku replied. And no, I've been staying good. Why? Present Mike held up his phone, pointing at the message on it as though the students could read it from their seats. 'Cause the principal himself just requested to speak to you during lunch. Personally. Now Izuku turned pale. He remembered Midnight's warning the previous day, and how the principal's office was the last place any student wanted to be. Turning to his classmates, Yoshio and Tabata both made prayer gestures and Moriboshi used her quirk to make icy prayer beads. Standing up and taking a breath, Izuku grabbed his bag and stepped out. The walk to the office was quiet. He left before lunch period technically started, so the halls were thankfully empty. Of course, this also meant there was nothing to distract Izuku from his thoughts. Why did the principal want to see him? Was he gonna get kicked out? Why would he get kicked out? His thoughts were a chaos of paranoia and questions. Yes, everyone here had been nice to him so far, but 1.5 days of niceness could not offset a decade of abuse and trauma. As it was, he considered himself lucky he wasn't having a panic attack. Speaking of which, he decided to take extra measures to make sure he wouldn't get one. He slowed his pace and took deep breaths all the way to the principal's office, stopping just outside. Never before had a door been so intimidating. Taking one more deep breath, he slowly reached up to knock on the door. To his shock, the door opened before he could even touch it. Not moving an inch due to the sudden opening, Izuku peered into the room without lowering his hand. The room in question was a pristine white, reminiscent of a hospital room. There were plants in each of the corners he could see, and the walls were bare save for a large mirror opposite the door. There was a large desk under the mirror with multiple chairs around it. Seated in one of the side chairs was Eraserhead, giving a side glance to Izuku. Seated at the desk was Principal Nedzu, the white mouse/bear/thing that ran the school. On the desk in front of Nedzu were a few trays of steaming katsudon and, Izuku's eyes widened when he saw his notebooks on the desk. Come in, come in. Nedzu greeted, gesturing to a nearby chair. I won't bite, young man. This snapped him out of his stupor and he meekly entered the office, jumping a bit when the door closed behind him. Taking a few more deep breaths, he approached the desk and sat in the chair in front of Nedzu. Before we begin, I bet you are wondering if I'm a bear, a dog or a mouse, right? I am actually more focused on the fact you're the principal, Izuku admitted as he fidgeted with his hand. Ah, a good observation to have. Nedzu laughed as he poured tea for everyone. Anyway, I called you here because of these, he gestured to the notebooks. I have to say, young man, the observations in these are quite inspiring. There's even a few things I never noticed until you pointed them out. I'm certainly glad Aizawa convinced you to let me read them. Izuku did a spit take at this. Why you were the teacher he mentioned. He turned to Aizawa. He was the teacher. Aizawa nodded and Midoriya turned back to Nedzu. Why you were the yes, I believe we established this, Nedzu laughed. I may be the principal, but I view myself as a teacher first. Now, back to the subject at hand, these notebooks. Resting his hand on the notebooks, Nedzu continued, as I said before, the observations in these notebooks could only be described as stellar. I've seen licensed quirk analysts who aren't nearly as detailed and meticulous. It is quite clear that this is a passion of the heart. Thank you, Izuku nodded as he rubbed his shoulder. I admit, I started them as a way of preparing to become a hero, but... He teared up a bit and squeezed his shoulder. It didn't work out. I see. Nedzu nodded. There was a few moments of silence before Nezu leaned forward, resting his head on his paws. Do you still want to be a hero? Izuku jerked his head up to look at him. What? Midoriya, Aizawa spoke up for possibly the first time since Izuku arrived. Do you know what a Type 2 hero is? Izuku looked at him confused before meekly shaking his head. After that, Aizawa reached into his pocket at the same time Nezu reached into his vest. Izuku watched as the two heroes set their hero licenses on the desk in front of him. Look at our licenses. Notice any differences, beyond the obvious? Izuku looked closely at both licenses. He had seen pictures of hero licenses in the past, but this was the first time he'd seen them with his own eyes. He soaked in every detail he could. Nezu's height. Aizawa's weight. Nezu's date of weight, that was unknown. After a minute or two of intense scrutiny, Izuku pointed at the name line on Nezu's license. There are TT2 lines behind your N name, P Principal Nezu. Aizawa-sensei's license only has one. Good eye, Nezu smiled as he and Aizawa picked their licenses back up. That is the only visible indication showing the difference between Type 1s and Type 2s, and we've worked hard to keep it that way. Get cozy and start eating, this is gonna be a bit of a talk. Izuku took his tray and started eating as Nezu sipped his tea a few times. You see, Midoriya, there are actually 3 different types of heroes out there, each with their own skill sets and privileges. Type 1s, aka enforcers, are the variety you and the majority of people are most familiar with. They work with law enforcement to apprehend criminals, are the most common seen for press releases, etc. Type 2s, or strategists, are heroes like me. We focus more on intelligence and analysis, taking in information and sorting it out before relaying the most pertinent intel to the enforcers, though we do fight from time to time. Type 3s, otherwise known as fortifiers, are the heroes like Recovery Girl, who don't do any form of combat but still support and help from the sidelines. Fascinating, Izuku admitted, wishing he had an empty notebook right now. This was something he never even considered, and was definitely something he'd have to keep an eye open for. The reason we tell you this, Aizawa leaned forward, is because we want to train you to be a Type 2 hero. Izuku almost fell out of his chair at this statement. What? The stuttering boy exclaimed. Just what you heard. Nezu beamed. We think you have the makings of a great Type 2 hero. WWWBBBWHY? Izuku asked. I am QQ quirkless and kinda am missing a little s something. He punctuated this last statement by grabbing his left sleeve and flipping it around. We are aware of both, Nezu continued smiling, and we want you to be aware that both of those can be worked around. While having an intelligence-based quirk is useful for a Type 2, you've demonstrated you don't need one to do what you do. As for the arm, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Now that you know your 2 biggest detriments are nothing to be concerned about, I will ask you again. Nezu leaned forward, smiling big as ever. Midoriya Izuku, do you still wish to be a hero? Class 1C was back in their homeroom for their afternoon study period. Each student studied their own subject, but each student also had the same question in mind. Anyone seen Midoriya? Midnight asked. Not since Mike Sensei's class, Gorogoro shrugged. You don't think he was abducted, do you? Who would abduct him? Kagero asked as she stretched her wings. I mean, I could see why he'd get abducted, but who in the school would? I bet it was some girl from the hero course. Hayashida leaned back in his chair. What do you think, Katsura-chan? The blind girl turned her head toward the door for a minute before smiling. We have nothing to worry about. The moment she finished her sentence, the door opened and Izuku stepped back inside with a pile of folders under his arm. Some of the students tried standing up but were stopped by Midnight before she approached the shorter boy. Is everything alright, Midoriya? She asked. Izuku smiled and handed her a late note to read before turning to the class. Everyone, he announced with a smile bright as the sun, I'm still GG gonna be in this CC class, but I am also GG gonna be receiving PP personalized training from Principal Nezu, BB because I am GG gonna be a hero. There was a brief, stunned silence before the entire class erupted in cheers. That's awesome. Tabata cheered. Good for you, Midoriya-kun. Moriboshi laughed. Chu can do it. Mousequit stood up on his chair to cheer. The class was filled with tumultuous cheering before Midnight smacked the podium with her whip. Simmer down, kids, she laughed. Turning and winking at Midoriya, and reveling at his blush, she continued, knew you had it in ya, kiddo. Get to your seat. With his huge smile, Izuku skipped back to his desk and set the folders down. Nezu had requested to keep borrowing the notebooks for a few more days, but had given Izuku folders covering both hero course classes so he could analyze each student in detail. With these folders and 2 fresh notebooks, Izuku had a lot of work ahead of him and was eager to get started. Oh hey, that one girl did have long earlobes. Go figure. Aizawa was giddy. Class 1A could see it. All Might could see it. He was helping supervise All Might's first class, and hardly derided the pro hero about his lack of teaching skills. As the students were paired off and going through their hero trials, All Might took the opportunity to approach the grizzled hero. You seem to be in good spirits, All Might stated. Could you tell me what occurred? The principal and I found another hero student, he smirked. He can't be transferred to the official hero course, but God I wish he could. He has more potential than half the class. I wish he had been here instead of Mineta. Yes, I saw you expelled him yesterday, All Might nodded. May I ask who this particular student is? You'll meet him later, Aizawa stated. And when you do, be nice to him. He's had a rough past. A rough past? Does he have a difficult quirk? No quirk at all. No quirk. And he's going to get hero training? You say that like it's a bad thing, Aizawa glared. All Might sweat a bit at his glare. Well, in my experience, it's not possible for a quirkless to be finish that sentence and I will break your nose, Aizawa growled. This kid has potential, and that's all you should care about. All Might sweat even more, and simply nodded before stepping back. Now he really wanted to know who this student was, but was scared to ask. This wasn't possible. Izuku flipped through the folders of both hero course classes. He did so multiple times. There was something missing. Someone he knew, would have been accepted into the hero course. No matter what he did, Izuku knew nothing and no one would have stopped him from entering. So why wasn't Bakugo Katsuki in these folders? Chapter end notes. I know you all saw that coming. You'll get more next chapter. XD. Also, a question for all you readers. I know the FIC is currently marked Izuku x Melissa, but I had an epiphany while at work earlier and am stuck in a mental debate, so I am asking you. Should I make this FIC be a 3-person polyamory FIC? I don't want to tell you who the second girl would be yet, but I will tell you it's a canon girl. I'm kinda leaning towards making it polyamory later, but I want to know your opinion on things. Please leave comments with what you think. I love reading your comments. Happy face, till next time. Chosen and discovering chapter notes. I'm gonna be honest, the last line of this chapter is what got me to finish this so quickly. See the end of the chapter for more notes. It was the end of the school day. Most of the students had already left their classrooms, eager to head home. In the workshop, however, Hatsume was hard at work on a new device. Despite being serious about getting it to work, at this point she was mostly just fiddling around as her guest observed the framework for the second iteration of the walking desk, as she called it. It is an ingenious creation, Nedzu said as he paced on top of Hatsume's workbench. It can certainly make things easier for any other students we get who are also missing an arm. You should be lauding Mito-chan, she grinned. He's the one who designed it, I just added a few parts. The principal nodded and continued looking over the adjustments she had made. Hatsume felt giddy at having the principal look at something she crafted. She had a massive mental list of designs, but a lot of those babies were stuck behind a wall set by Power Loader. So if the principal himself liked what she made, maybe she could convince him to let her try some of the others. She smiled bigger as she took a soldering iron to her current project, and Nedzu's attention was diverted to the opening door. Ah, good afternoon, Midoriya. Oh, Midoriya must be here to drop off his desk. Wait a minute, he was here while she was instantly set the soldering iron down and pushed her project aside. If she kept working on it there might have been a chance of it exploding, and she did not need Midoriya around for that. She swiveled her stool around to greet the small greenette, missing the curious look Nedzu gave her. Izuku himself gave a smile as he unfastened the desk. See, could you help me get it off, he nervously chuckled. Still having a bit of trouble. God, you're too adorable. May thought as she laughed and got up to assist. Undoing the final few clips, she pulled the desk off his shoulders before giving said shoulders a gentle rub, eliciting a shy squeak from the boy. Too tense, she observed. I'll have to see if I can make the next desk lighter for you. It's alright, he waved with his hand. I think I need some toughening up anyways. Turning to Nedzu, the small boy gave a small bow. Gee, good afternoon, sensei. Afternoon to you too, the small mammal smiled. How are you enjoying those files on the hero students? Think of any improvements yet? A couple, Izuku nodded, along with some outfit adjustments. Few of them are a BB bit, PP provocative right now. A few moments later, Hatsume stopped rubbing his shoulders and went back to her stool. Also, sensei, I have a bit of a question. Oh. Hatsume could hear the interest in Nedzu's voice. This should be good. The shorter boy stuttered, I was looking through the FF files and noticed something, or rather someone, was missing. If you're referring to a purple midget, Nedzu smiled, Mineta Minoru was expelled yesterday. He failed the quirk assessment, and his behavior was deemed inadequate. IIGG guessed SS something like that happened yesterday when I was watching them, Izuku rubbed his shoulder, but my question was about someone else. Someone I went to school with, who was gonna try for the hero course here, and Nedzu cut him off with a raised paw. You are referring to a Bakuga Katsuki, correct? Izuku nodded as Hatsum leaned forward. This might not have been her conversation, but she didn't want to risk working on anything while Midoriya was in the room. Plus she was curious. Was this Bakugu a friend of Midoriya's? What were they like? Did they? I'm sure it's obvious, Nedzu smiled, cutting off Mei's train of thought, but I guess you would need verbal confirmation from me for it to sink in. I can say, with absolute honesty, that Bakuga Katsuki is not only not a student in the hero course, but he is not even a student of UA. Oh. Hatsum couldn't help but think the principal was a bit blunt there and turned to comfort Izuku on his former classmate's failure, only to see his face wasn't sorrowful. If anything, there seemed to be a glimmer of something in his eyes. Disbelief? Joy? She couldn't tell, but she wanted to know. He isn't? Izuku asked. Really? But I know his goal was to see come to the hero course and Midoriya, Nedzu interrupted, do you know UA's policy on bullying? Bullying? Why would wait? If either of the males in the room were looking at Mei, they would have seen the spark of realization in her eyes. This Bakugu wasn't a friend, but a bully. Who would bully someone so small and sweet? Looking at Izuku, she saw him shake his head at Nedzu's question. 2 words, Nedzu raised his paw. 0. Tolerance. He started pacing on the workbench again as he continued, UA's goal is to train people to become either heroes or upstanding citizens of society. As such, anyone who has a significant history of bullying isn't permitted to join UA, and I think we can both agree that, he pointed at Izuku's left shoulder, goes well beyond bullying. Hatsum's gasp of shock and horror went unnoticed by the other two. But it was a one-time occurrence, Izuku stated, and with the other teachers not punishing him for everything else, his record was empty. Officially, yes, Nedzu nodded, and his application was one of those I personally looked into. You see, while I was going through a number of applicants looking for, well, it's not important what exactly I was looking at them for, but while I was doing it I had a guest who was a mutual acquaintance. Kamui Woods. Izuku's eyes widened as Nedzu continued, still pacing on the workbench. We were chatting up, casual as can be, when he spotted Bakugu's application and asked why it was even there. I noticed he seemed a bit hostile about it, and asked him about it. Now, I would have figured it out eventually, but having Mr. Woods there sped up the process. He pulled up the crime report concerning your last incident with him while I contacted Ed Shot, whom Kamui claimed was a second witness. With his testimony combined with the old report covering the incident, I decided to look deeper into things, and hacked into the cameras of your old school. You can imagine how appalled I was to see what he did to you simply because you're quirkless. With everything I learned that day, I personally made sure Bakuga Katsuki was barred from taking the entrance exam. Izuku stood there, slack-jawed and wide-eyed. From his expression and his prior question, it was clear he had expected to see Bakugu in the hero course no matter what happened. He was in such a stupor over what he heard he didn't notice Hatsum moving until she set her hands on his shoulders. He turned to her and was shocked to see tears in her eyes and an expression of rage. This Bakugu. She hissed, not even bothering to grace him with an honorific, where is he? Everything was explained now. His stutter. His nervous shaking. His missing arm and his PTSD, it was all because of some brat named Bakugu. All because this sweet little guy was quirkless. Hatsum wasn't a fighter, but hearing what he did to this poor meek boy made her blood boil. I dunno, Izuku stuttered. I haven't had anything to do with him since that day. Hatsum looked at Izuku for a few more seconds. I'm gonna kill him. I should remind you, Nedzu laughed as he hopped to the floor, that if you are going to discuss murder, I would prefer you did it out of earshot so that I could claim deniability. Now, was there anything else, Midoriya? Izuku was silent for a few seconds, still stunned from Mei's sudden fury before replying. I'll have the files are ready by morning. I'll get here early, too. Excellent. Oh, allow me to walk you to the gates, Midoriya. Hatsum was working on something before you arrived, we should leave her to it. Nedzu gave Hatsum a casual wave while Midoriya's was a bit more heartfelt before they both walked out. The instant they were gone, Hatsum ran back to her bench. Pushing her prior project off the table completely, she got to work adjusting the second desk. The hero students could wait for their equipment. She had a cinnamon roll to protect. The next day, so you're a venomous snake. Izuku asked Sakai as the two made their way to the classroom for morning announcements. Yup, Sakai nodded. It's just paralytic, though. Docs tested it thoroughly. Still cool. I mean, if you ever became a C-cop, you could just say, F-freeze, and B-bite them to make them freeze. The two boys laughed at this last sentence before settling into a comfortable silence. At the start Izuku was afraid it would have been hard to get along with Sakai, but to his relief the snake was a rather jovial individual. Just had to be careful not to step on his tail, or the rest of him for that matter. By the way, Sakai stated as the two entered their class, being greeted by the rest of the present students. I noticed you're not wearing your desk thingy this morning. Did it break? No, Hatsum-san I is just making some adjustments I think. She said it'd be ready after lunch. After that, Midnight stepped into the room. Alright class, she declared from the podium, only got one real announcement this morning. You've all had a couple days to get to know each other, so. She smirked, and that worried the class. It's time to pick a class president. The class was now less worried. You can use whatever method you want, she continued. You can put your names forward, vote for someone, or. Midnight's words petered off when she saw everyone in the class, excluding Sakai, who didn't have hands, pointing at Kagero Kiana. The white-haired girl looked around in confusion, ruffling her wings. Me? She asked. Kagero-san, Tabata smiled, you're basically the class mom already. I bet you'll do fine. And if you need help, Hojo said from behind Izuku, you can always choose a vice-prez. Oh, that makes things so much easier. Kagero turned to Izuku with a smile. I elect Midoriya-kun as vice-president. Oh, he'd be the perfect pick. Gorogoro cheered from his seat next to Oyuniko. He can use that awesome lil brain of his to support the main prez, but not be in the main meeting so he wouldn't have to worry about being picked on. You're right. Moriboshi smiled. It's perfect. Don't I get a essay in this? Izuku nervously asked. Sorry dude, Tabata smirked, vote's been cast. But you didn't vote. All for Midoriya-kun becoming vice president? Yoshio bluntly asked as he raised his hand. His gesture was soon repeated by everyone else in class, except for Sakai, who still didn't have hands. Votes passed. I hate all of you, Izuku sighed as he face-desked. The class gave light-hearted chuckles at his reaction, and Midnight couldn't help but smile. Inko-san's little boy was gonna be fine. This is not FF fine, and I still hate all of you, Izuku mumbled as he sat down for lunch. The rest of his class just laughed as they sat in their corner of the lunchroom. Tabata and Yoshio sat to Izuku's left and promptly started fighting over shrimp while Sakai and Asano sat to his right, chattering calmly. No need to be nervous, Kagero smiled from her seat across from him. I think it'd be fine if you just helped the class with studying sometimes, and maybe helped me organize class outings. Nothing scary, I promise. Gotta ask, though, Tabata leaned forward, not noticing Yoshio stealing one of his shrimp, do you know what sort of training you'll be getting from the principal? He looked back at his meal in time to stop Yoshio from committing another act of grand theft shrimp. And not yet, Izuku shrugged. Apparently he's called in another hero TT to look over my notebooks, and the two of them will figure it out from there. That decision made Izuku a bit nervous. He didn't want his notebooks to be shown to everyone, and what if this other hero thought they were creepy? He wasn't scared, per se, but definitely nervous. His thoughts were derailed when he heard some giggling on the other end of the room. Turning, he saw several girls he recognized as hero course students. They were all looking through small folders, pointing at what was inside them and chattering up a storm. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but their expressions were certainly happy. Those are hero course, right? Asano asked, following Izuku's stare. You met him, yet? No, Izuku smiled, but I did make those folders for them. The folders in question were notes and observations he had taken concerning their quirks, and ideas for improvement. Judging from their expressions, it looked like the students were taking the ideas to heart. He didn't leave his name on any of the notes, too afraid of how the students would react if they learned the notes were penned by a disabled quirkless. He wanted to help them improve, and, excuse me, a voice spoke up, which class are you in? Izuku looked up at the voice, and saw a boy with short pale hair and a condescending look. He recognized the newcomer as Monoma Nito, a boy with a copycat quirk in Class 1B. We're 1C, Sakai replied as he scooped up some rice with his tongue. Why ya asking? The hero course boy only sneered. I was just wondering what sort of class would allow a pet on the grounds, but knowing it's the class with a quirkless in it makes more sense. Looking over the stunned Gen Ed kids, Monoma continued, any of you the quirkless? If you are, I'd suggest dropping out now. UA is too good for a useless kid like that. He started laughing, not seeing Izuku curl up. In Izuku's mind, Monoma was slowly taking Bakugu's spot. He reached for his phone, ready to contact Midnight, before he heard Asano laughing. That's funny, she laughed. You're funny. Wanna know something else that's funny? She laughed for a few more moments, confusing Monoma. Suddenly, like a striking snake, Asano grew to her full height in under a second, grabbed Monoma by the head and hurled him across the room. The boy screamed as he flew past the other stunned students and right out the cafeteria doors. The lunchroom was silent as everyone slowly turned to Asano, who stood up and propped her leg on the table. Anyone else feel like belittling quirkless people? She roared. Come on up, I'll throw you out right behind him. Silence reigned in the lunchroom, no one even touching their trays after what just happened. Did you hear a squeaky noise as she grabbed his head? Tabata whispered to Izuku. Before the disabled student could reply, alarms blared loud and clear, plunging the room into chaos. Oog, that wasn't fun, Midnight sighed as she lay her head on the podium. Izuku sat in a chair next to her, acting as her assistant while Kagero had a meeting with the other class presidents. I agreed, Izuku chuckled. Kinda crazy just how far the media's willing to go. After the media broke into the campus, the staff declared that afternoon classes would be cancelled, giving the students a much-needed study period to calm down. Midnight was thankful her class had been among the more calm ones during the whole event, and regretting not getting a picture of Asano carrying some of the class to safety. It had been a comical sight, some students under each arm, Sakai coiled around her like a decoration and Izuku riding her shoulders. Didn't you see them this morning? She asked. They were crowding the gates and harassing any student they could. I came in early this morning, Izuku replied. There weren't any reporters when I arrived. Lucky you, she ruffled his hair. Heard you were actually really calm through the entire thing. You know, being calm in a crisis is a good trait for a hero to have. That was something the judges were looking for during the entrance exam, which I'm sure you would have passed even with your arm. I doubt it, Izuku leaned back in his chair. Back then, before I came to this class, I was in a bad spot. No one told me I could be a HH hero. Even had a P-Pro I really looked up to tell me that to my face. What? Midnight's face scrunched up in anger. A pro hero told you that? What hero told you to give up on your dream? It's nothing, really. Izuku flailed his arm, grabbing the attention of some other students. It was a while ago, and I'm much better now. That's not important, Midnight poked his nose. A pro hero told you couldn't be a hero. That's a gross violation of the hero code. Heroes are supposed to be supportive and encouraging all the time. A pro who says such discouraging things could get fined, lose status, any of 100 things to show just why saying mean things like that is a bad idea. I don't think he meant it that way. I mean, all Izuku covered his mouth, forcing himself silent. Midnight asked. When Izuku refused to continue, she looked away in thought. After a few moments, she looked back at Izuku with a concerned face. Aight. Izuku tensed up at the name, and Midnight's concern sharpened. Are you saying, she whispered, that All Might himself said that to you? Izuku looked down and away, unwilling to reply yet knowing his silence was admittance enough. Midnight just stared for a few moments longer before standing up and turning to the class. Kids, something's come up that I need to deal with. Just keep studying, relax, chat, whatever. I shouldn't be long. Not giving anyone a chance to ask, Midnight strolled out the room. She was a woman on a mission. As you can see, Nedzu explained to the Type 2 hero seated across from him, this young lad certainly knows his stuff. That is no understatement, Sir Nighthite agreed as he paged through one of Izuku's notebooks. His notes are a bit messy, clearly a transcript of his own observations and thought process, and yet magnificently detailed. These books also do a good job showing just how his skills improved over the years. If he weren't a first year, this would be incentive enough to take him on as an intern. How good is he physically, though? Not too good, I'm afraid, Nedzu chuckled. Prior to our scouting him out it looked like most of his physical training came from figuring out how to run from his tormentors. That combined with his small frame make me think he'd be more of a precision fighter than an overpowering one, possibly reliant on tools. Which is why you requested me personally, Nighthite observed. Alright, I'll help you train him. His missing arm might be a bit of an issue, but I'm sure you've got something planned for that. Before Nedzu could reply, his personal phone started ringing. One moment, Nedzu held up his paw before taking the phone. Principal Nedzu speaking, I'm sorry, she's doing what? Nedzu listened to the person on the other end for a few more seconds before sighing. Be right down. Hanging up the phone, the mammal turned back to Nighthite. Forgive me, but something has come up that I need to handle. I shouldn't be gone long. Take your time, Knight, I said, holding up the notebook in his hands. I'll be reading these more. This Midoriya has around 8 pages of notes on pro-hero Slenderman, and no one else has notes like this. Nedzu nodded and exited his office while Knight I read up on the cryptid of a hero. The trip to the teacher's lounge was a short one, and the principal opened the door and beheld a rather curious sight. He could barely keep from laughing, however, at the noise he was hearing, which was a series of "fong" noises accentuated by someone saying "idiot" over and over. The principal watched for several seconds before announcing his arrival by clearing his throat, silencing the room. Midnight, Nedzu smiled. I am aware you are a rather passionate person, but I find myself at a loss. What has transpired that compelled you to beat All Might over the head with a cardboard poster tube? Chapter end notes. Well, there was a bit of comedy, fluff and drama. Things are gonna get more exciting soon enough. Get dunked on, Bakuku. In this house, we actually suffer for our crimes. I hope y'all liked the picture of Izuku chatting with Sakai. I'd love to make pics of all the students of Class C, but with the limited scope of the program I use, and my own lack of skill in editing, that might not occur. We'll see how things go. I know a lot of folks are like me and dislike Monoma, so hopefully his impromptu flying lesson was enjoyable. For the speed and emotion behind it, just think of that one gif of Leonardo DiCaprio smashing a glass on the other guy's head. And now I have a reason to throw Night Eye in here. I like him. Next time on Type 2, we get a new desk, a pun battle, and the start of USJ. Stay tuned. Discovering and Danger chapter notes. Apologies in advance if this chapter seems a bit lame. I hope it is still satisfactory. See the end of the chapter for more notes. All Might stared through a small window into the classroom for 1C. He could see Izuku, and could tell the boy had not noticed him. The pro-hero saw the boy laughing with some of his classmates, but he saw their smile was smaller than it was when he first met the boy close to a year ago. He could hear the boy had a stutter that was absent in the past. He could also see Izuku's left sleeve hanging limp and empty. Seeing that sleeve hurt his heart more than Midnight's poster tube hurt his head. What you did, a familiar voice stated, was rather hypocritical, Yagi-san. All Might turned his head in surprise. Night-Eye. What are you doing here? He had never expected to see his old sidekick again, let alone see him walking down a UA hallway. The hero stopped in front of All Might, regarding him coolly for a few seconds before holding up the charred notebook 13. You signed this, Night Eye stated plainly. You saw the meticulous notes he took, saw how utterly brilliant they were. You heard he was quirkless, just like you used to be. His eyes narrowed. You told him no. All Might started. I thought it was the right thing. He looked back into the classroom and continued, I saw those notes, and was afraid that if villains learned about them, he, and everyone close to him would be a target. I tried directing him to safer careers, anything to keep him and that innocence away from the trauma and horror of our profession. When I saw him charge that villain back then, I was scared for him but also in awe. In that moment, he reminded me what it meant to be a hero, but he also reminded me of why I became a hero. To protect those who could not defend themselves, people like him. And yet he still ended up being maimed in defense of another, Night Eye admonished. All Might flinched at that, and after a few seconds Night Eye sighed. I thought you were a fool to disregard my warning in the past, Yagi. I never thought just how foolish you could be. He walked past All Might, leaving the hero by the door. After going a short distance, he stopped and turned his head. I will be training him as a Type 2. I know you already chose your successor after Togata turned you down, but try to imagine how great that boy would have been if he was given your quirk instead. Not even awaiting a response, Night Eye continued walking. All Might was truly alone in the hallway, alone in his thoughts, until the final bell rang to dismiss the students. He quickly ran away, not wanting to be seen by any of the students. Especially the boy he failed. School had ended, and Nedzu was taking one of his walks around the school. After the incident in the teacher's lounge, the principal needed a calm moment. Walking the empty halls after the day's ending would normally provide that. Normally. As he walked, Nedzu happened upon Power Loader. The support course teacher was sitting on a bench in one of the atriums, his helmet on the ground by his feet. Even with his bangs covering his eyes, Nedzu could see his fellow teacher had what could be described as an expression of depressed contemplation. It was quite unusual to see him like this. Nedzu plodded over and hopped onto the bench, though Power Loader didn't seem to notice he was there until Nedzu patted his leg. Forgive me, Principal, Power Loader bowed his head. I didn't see you there. I am a bit hard to spot sometimes, Nedzu chuckled. However, it was easy for me to spot that you seem a bit distressed. May I ask the issue? It's the transfer student, Power Loader replied. The third-year girl from America. I've been giving her the same assignments as everyone else, but... Is she lagging behind? No. If anything, she's shooting ahead. Power Loader sighed and put his face in his hands. She's completed every project and assignment in record time, earning top marks for each one. She told me she transferred here so she could get a feel for actually helping heroes, but I'm afraid she'll regret it if I don't figure out some way to actually challenge her. The teacher sat like that for a few moments, but looked up when he realized Nedzu had not responded. Lookin'. Gee, at the mammal, he saw Nedzu had a contemplative look of his own. Then he smirked, and chuckled. Power Loader had long ago learned to fear the chuckling principle. Majima-san, Nedzu referred to Power Loader by name, your dilemma has given me an idea that could solve both your own dilemma as well as mine. Yeah, Power Loader was scared now. As of this morning, Izuku had been a student of UA for 4 days. 4 days into the school year, and Izuku had actual friends, no one cared he was quirkless, and he was gonna be a hero. He almost wept with joy these past few days because of this. If one had told him a year ago that this would happen, he wouldn't have believed it. His giddiness had reached the point he was practically skipping down the hallway to Mei's workshop to grab the new desk she made. She promised it would be better than his first one, so he could only guess what she'd improved. Reaching the workshop, he gave a quick knock on the door. He knew he was the only one who bothered knocking, so Mei would know to put away any volatile projects before calling him in. Waiting for her response, he smiled and opened the door. As he stepped in, he opened his mouth to say something, only to stop. Mei was at her workbench with the new desk, and standing on the table next to her was Nedzu. That wasn't unexpected. What was unexpected was the other person in the room. He was an incredibly tall man in a white suit standing to the side. His hair was dark green with yellow streaks, his eyes a brilliant yellow. Izuku immediately recognized him as Sir Night-Eye, another pro-hero he had idolized. His glower was a bit intimidating, but was nowhere near as hateful as Bakugu's had been. What was more intimidating was the notebook in his hand, which Izuku recognized as Analysis Book 11. Good morning, Midoriya. Nedzu greeted. You've arrived at a good time. Come, come. I'd like to introduce you to a fellow Type 2 hero. I'm sure you recognize him. Notebook 3, I believe. Izuku gave a silent nod as he stepped closer. I've read through your books, young man. Sir Night-Eye held up the notebook in his hand. I must admit, I am genuinely impressed. You seem to have a good head for analysis. Good enough to be a hero, certainly. Thank you, Izuku bowed his head. I am glad to have the privilege. And most K-kids would gladly give an arm and a leg for this chance. He gave a weak chuckle and rubbed his left shoulder. Guess I got my chance at a D discount. Night-Eye gave a smirk at the joke. I see you have your finger on humor, too. I think that was a bit of a reach, sir. Really? I guess I'll have to shoulder that embarrassment. I thought he had a good grip on it, the Mei piped up. Oh my god, Nedzu laughed and buried his face in his paws. You guys are gonna get along swimmingly, I can tell. Your fault for putting us all in the same room, sir. Mei smirked as she tightened something on her table. Continuing, Night-Eye said with a smirk as he walked toward the stuttering youth, I'm here to help Nedzu provide you with additional Type 2 training. Nedzu will focus primarily on your analytical skills, along with strategic training. I'll be helping in those fields as well, but with a bigger focus on your physical form. He set his hand on Izuku's head. It's clear you're not a strong individual, so your training will help bolster that. I'll also be training you in the use of smaller weapons, primarily those usable with one hand, given your condition. In any event, I do look forward to working with you, and watching your progress. Which begins this afternoon, for the record, Nedzu smiled. You'll be busy all afternoon. Midnight will take the time to inform your class. I'll fill you in on the details during lunch. It's done. Mei shouted as she hoisted the walking desk into the air. Mito-chan, come on over. Before Izuku could even move, Mei shot over to him and slapped the desk on his shoulders. To his surprise, the desk seemed even lighter than the previous iteration. Made a few adjustments with your safety in mind, Mei proclaimed as she tapped the wooden part of the desk. Changed the wood to a harder, specially treated wood. The same sort that are used to construct desks for heroes with strength quirks. I bet this could stop one of All Might's fingers, so you can use it as a shield. The pipes for the frames are heat resistant, so any jerks with heat quirks can't use them to burn you. Also comes with a quick release strap right here. Tug it and it'll just fall off. The biggest addition, though. She tapped a button on the side and a small slot opened up, dropping a tiny red vial into Mei's hand. The vial was red and had a small light glowing inside of it. Handsome, Nedzu asked with a frown, where did you get that? Saw a sample in the lab yesterday, the inventor responded, fabricated a copy myself. Anyway, Mito-chan, this is an experimental power source UA is devising. They use solar-powered plasma cells for the school buildings and stuff, but can't implement those in equipment cause they release a massive electric shock if they get wet. This little vial can run for almost a decade without dying, and its sole purpose is to send a signal to a few devices, which will be carried by myself, Midnight and your class president. It will send this signal every 3 seconds. If you ever get in trouble, break the vial. When it breaks, May snapped the vial between her fingers, and a second later the tablet on her workbench started beeping loudly. Basically, if we don't receive that signal, our devices will alert us. You are awfully protective of Midoriya, Night Eye observed. You have only known him a few days, correct? Mind telling us why you're so adamant on keeping him safe? May was silent for several seconds. My cousin was a pro-hero. This stunned Izuku, and surprised Night Eye. Nedzu seemed unaffected, but very little could change him visually. May waited a few seconds, letting the news settle, before continuing her explanation while adjusting the desk to fit Izuku's small frame. My cousin used to be pro-hero scouter. He has a similar quirk to mine, only his was a lot stronger. He could count the fingers of someone standing on a mountain 15 kilometers away. He felt his quirk was better suited for spying and watching. He rarely got into a fight himself, and his arrest record was almost non-existent. Then, one day, villains captured him. They left in him a room for over 2 weeks, occasionally questioning him and testing their quirks on him. The worst part was they'd always begin the torture by flashing bright light into his room, disorienting him. That got to him. She finished working on Izuku's harness, but rested her hands on his shoulders, looking at the floor. When he was rescued, it seemed like he'd be fine. His time in the hospital was peaceful and quiet. When he was released, the media was waiting for him. Their cameras, all had flashing lights. Seeing those again, he forgot he was out. He just fell to the ground, begging for it to stop. After that, he's had to avoid anything with flashing lights. Any time he's gotten hit with them, he'd just freeze and his eyes. She lifted her head and looked at Midoriya, tears in her eyes. Your eyes were just like his when we first met. After that explosion, you weren't here. You were back where it happened. She gently rubbed his left shoulder. My cousin was a pro-hero, an adult. You're 15 years old, Mito-chan. You shouldn't have suffered enough to get eyes like that. That's why I'm helping as much as I am. I want to help you get better, and make sure you don't get worse. The instant she finished her sentence, Izuku pulled the quick-release strap for his desk and pulled her into a tight half-hug. May was surprised by the sudden gesture, and slowly hugged back, resting her head on top of his. Izuku himself was silently crying into her shoulder. The pro-heroes, to their credit, remained silent through this exchange. Neither of them knew about Izuku's PTSD before this, though Nedzu thought it might have been a possibility, and now they both knew Izuku would need more than hero training to get through everything. The majority of the school day was thankfully a calm one for Midoriya. His classmates were all as supportive as they had been, with a few geeking out over his new desk. Midnight was normal as ever, though everyone was curious about the abundance of cardboard poster tubes in her classroom. The only thing that could have gone sour that morning was when the class was heading to Samantha's classroom, when they passed Class 1B on their way to Midnight. The jerk from before, Monoma, looked like he was gonna try something before Asano gave a glare so icy even Moriboshi felt the chill. The hero course student quickly shut his mouth without saying a word. Lunch arrived quickly enough, and Izuku was called to the principal's office soon after it began. Night Eye was there again, and the two older men, man and mammal, informed Izuku of what his afternoon would be like. Both Type 2 heroes knew that analyzing quirks on paper was vastly different from analyzing them with your own eyes, so it was decided Izuku would go with Class 1A to the unforeseen simulation joint to observe their quirks in action and up close. He would do the same with Class 1B the following day. Nedzu also pointed out that Izuku would be meeting with someone the following morning, but refused to explain further. Good thing Izuku was patient. However, it was hard to see that patience as he rolled on his ankles in front of the bus that would take him and 1A to the USJ. Standing with him was Aizawa, and the two waited for Class 1A to arrive. The teacher looked down at him, at the small Viridian boy, and couldn't help but think he should have belonged in hero course in the first place. That first day they met, the boy had sensed Aizawa sneaking up on him. Most pros couldn't do that. Then he surprised Aizawa further by recognizing him on sight. That level of observation alone put Izuku above most of his current class. Unfortunately they couldn't do an official transfer due to his physical condition, and they'd need the school therapist to map out his mental condition, so the best he could do is work with Nedzu in teaching him to be a Type 2. After a few more minutes, the two could hear the approaching students. Izuku smiled and took a step before Aizawa stopped him. Wait here, Aizawa stated. Something you need to hear before you reveal yourself. With that, Aizawa stepped around the corner and faced his class. Some students were excited, others were calm, and a few were antsy. He waited for them to quiet down before saying what he knew needed to be said. Before we continue, class, I want to hear your opinion on quirkless people. This caught the class by surprise, some students looking at each other in confusion. Aizawa could see Izuku have a worried look around the corner of the bus. He knew that, despite his current smiles, Izuku was still worried about a lot of things. This would at least be one thing Aizawa could help with. With all due respect, sir, a tall girl with a black ponytail raised her hand. I don't understand the reason for that question. I mean, why would any of us have a negative opinion of quirkless? Quirkless people are people, dude, the excitable redhead declared. And I'm not just saying that because that big girl from Gen Ed scares me. Yeah, the tall brown-haired girl waved her arms. People who think quirkless means worthless are absolute assholes. A few of her classmates laughed at this announcement, but agreed with the sentiment. Aizawa noticed Izuku's face slowly soften, like he was about to cry. Good answers, Aizawa finally said before waving Izuku over. The one-armed kid walked over next to Aizawa, giving a shy smile and bowing his head. This is Midoriya Izuku from Class 1C. He will be joining us for this trip. He is quirkless, and the one who wrote those pamphlets you received yesterday morning. That made the class explode with excitement, and made Izuku duck behind Aizawa. The teacher raised his hand before the class could mob the Gen Ed student. Try to keep calm around him, Aizawa defended Izuku. In case you haven't noticed, he hasn't exactly had a good past. He is going to be receiving specialized hero training from the principal himself, which includes analysis. He's already come up with ideas from reading your folders, now he's coming to see your quirks in action. Everyone on the bus. Yaoyorozu, you sit next to Midoriya because you're the only student I trust not to try anything. Everyone nodded and clambered onto the bus, with Izuku and Momo sitting towards the back. It was a bit of a cute and funny sight seeing them sit side by side, with Izuku's head barely reaching the same level as Momo's shoulder. Soon the bus started going, Aizawa decided to nap, and the other students started talking among themselves. Izuku might have been excited before, but actually sitting with the hero course students made him nervous again. So, you wrote those notes on us, Karo? The frog girl in the seat in front of Izuku peeked over the top towards the boy. Oh, yes, that was me, Izuku nodded. Did you like them? They were awesome, the brown-haired girl from earlier replied, her head appearing next to the frog girl's. I never would have thought that way before those notes. Oh, I'm Uraraka Ochako. I'm Tsuyu, the frog girl raised her hand. I tend to speak my mind a lot. Gotta ask, did you lose your arm because that's a rude thing to ask, Momo interjected. I'm sure however it happened was an unpleasant experience. It's alright, Izuku stuttered as he self-consciously rubbed his shoulder. It happened around a year ago. I'll tell you the story later, promise. The rest of the bus ride was fairly quiet, with the surrounding girls making small talk with Izuku, bringing a blush to his face. Why was UA filled with pretty girls? After a fair bit of time, the bus came to a stop and Aizawa immediately stood up. Izuku was uncertain if he actually slept on the trip because of that. When the doors opened, Class 1A plus Izuku walked off and into the building. Both Izuku and Ochako geeked out upon seeing Hero 13 was there, too. Before anyone could really do anything else, however, the hairs on the back of Izuku's neck stood up as what looked like a black cloud appeared in the middle of the area just beneath the stairs. The other students noticed as well, wondering if this was part of their training. That line of thought was immediately stopped and a literal horde of unpleasant-looking individuals came walking out of the cloud. Villains. Izuku gasped. Chapter end notes. Here comes chaos. That's really all I can say right now. XD Danger and Rescue. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Izuku was frozen in fear. There were villains. A lot of villains. He knew the actual hero course students weren't ready for this, and he most certainly wasn't ready either. He snapped out of it when he saw a couple Class A kids move in front of him. Stay behind us, the tall brunette, Uraraka Ochako, whispered. We'll keep you safe, Karo, Azui croaked. Having the two hero course students shielding him helped his nerves, keeping him getting a panic attack. He could overhear Aizawa and 13 whispering something, but he couldn't catch it. He turned and saw the doors behind them were still open, and had an idea. As the villains finished pouring from the gates, Izuku quietly shuffled towards one of the other students. Aida-san, he whispered, go back to the school. Get the TT teachers. Why you're the fastest, why you should outrun anything that might be outside. Ida looked appalled at this. I can't just leave you all here, he hissed back. Why you're not leaving us, Izuku said with determination. Why you are getting reinforcements? We can't handle that many on our own. Go. Ida's eyes narrowed, but even he could see the sense. Hunching down, he carefully walked back before dashing out the doors. Back to the buses. Aizawa shouted. 13, keep them safe. The rest of the students turned to rush the doors, but were stopped when a man composed of black mist with bright yellow eyes appeared before them. Sorry, he insincerely apologized, but I can't let any of you leave. Everyone gave a shout of surprise when the floor beneath them disappeared, turning into the same black mist as earlier. Izuku himself screamed as he fell down, and down, and down. How far was he gonna? Oh wait, there was water underneath him now. Thankfully he spotted it quickly enough to take a deep breath before crashing into the liquid. Thank goodness it was deep water, it woulda hurt to impact solid ground after a fall like that. Izuku was also glad his desk was lightweight, so it didn't pull him. Wait. Izuku facepalmed. His desk had that thingy May made him. Even if Ida couldn't make it, he could contact help. The one-armed student started pulling himself up to get some air, but was stopped when he felt weight on his leg. Looking down in surprise, he saw a man had grabbed his foot. A man dressed in green, with blonde hair that looked like seaweed. He looked up at Izuku with empty black eyes and gave a reverberating laugh that Izuku could hear even underwater. The boy finally screamed in fear and kicked the man in the face, realizing too late he had just expended his air. Water rushed into his mouth and lungs, making him curl up as other aquatic villains gathered around him. Suddenly the villains found themselves repelled by a speedy green blur. Izuku tried swimming up as the villains were pushed back, but another one managed to grab onto his desk. Before he could do anything, the villain unintentionally pulled the quick-release strap, freeing Izuku in time for the green blur to grab him and fly up to the surface. He flew through the air before landing on a solid wood floor. Izuku curled up and coughed as someone rubbed his back. Careful, said a female voice he didn't recognize. Try to breathe slowly. They're not coming aboard, a second voice he recognized as Tsuyu stated. I think we got some breathing room. Izuku coughed for another minute or two before taking a deep breath and looking around. He was on a boat, he could see that now. With him were Tsuyu and a girl with long green vines for hair. He recognized her as Shiozaki Ibara, a girl with a plant quirk. Are you alright? Shiozaki asked, her face filled with worry. Why you got a nice VV voice, Izuku coughed, making Azui sigh with relief. Sounds like you're alright, Karo. Sorry about your desk, I didn't have time to grab it. Izuku froze at that, remembering what he had been doing before the villains attacked him. Holding his head, he gave a loud groan. Maysville was still in that desk. He had no idea how deep the water was, and didn't dare ask Azui to try retrieving it while surrounded by villains. He would have to think of something else. Does this boat work, Ibara? Azui asked their classmate. No, she sighed. There are no keys, and I couldn't hotwire it. If you're religious, how do you know how to hotwire a vehicle? Azui-san, Izuku groaned as he stood up, I think we should focus on the task at hand. He looked around, over the edge of the boat. They were in the dead center of the lake he had seen from the entrance. It wasn't too wide, but he could see over 24 villains floating around, including the freaky blonde one that grabbed his foot. No way they could swim to safety. Any ideas, Karo? Azui asked. I am thinking, he replied. It's clear the villains don't know our Q-quirks, so they're not attacking yet. ASU. I-san, how far can you jump while carrying people? If it's you two, I could carry us to the shore easily. You're not what I would call heavy, Karo. But some of those villains could catch us in midair, and I'm the only one who can fight effectively in water. She's right, Shiozaki sighed. My vines are good, but they're slow in the water. Izuku sighed and dropped his head. He knew the villains would get impatient soon, and he needed to think of something. Thinking was all he was good for, after all. Looking towards the front of the boat to see the shore on that side, he noticed the bow had solar panels on top. At least that meant the villains couldn't explode any gas. Wait. Solar panels. His eyes widened as he remembered what May told him that morning. They use solar-powered plasma cells for the school buildings and stuff, but can't implement those in equipment cause they release a massive electric shock if they get wet. Izuku dashed past the girls and into the boat's engine room. Confused, the girls followed him. He saw it had a traditional-looking engine, but next to it was a big black box. He knelt down and worked on opening it, quietly thanking Azui as she helped him wrench the box open, revealing an array of fist-sized cubes that were shining with a green light and had plugs on top. Kinda dumb to put these on a BB boat, Izuku laughed as he started pulling them out, BB but we can let that oversight slide for now. What are those? Shiozaki asked. Plasma cells. I'll look around for more. Azui-san, can you see if there's any T-tape down here? What are you thinking, Karo? The frog girl asked as she rifled through the nearby boxes. A friend told me about these, Izuku stuttered as Shiozaki returned with an armful of cubes. They're good batteries, but if they get wet, they release a big shock. So, if we throw those in, Shiozaki finished with wide eyes, we can incapacitate the villains. Truly, we've been blessed to land here. Didn't know if could be considered religious, Izuku laughed, but right now I'll take what I can get. And need to tape these together though. Thankfully, at that point Azui returned with a huge roll of duct tape, and the three students got to work arranging all the cells and taping them together into a single huge mass with all their plugs pointed out. Are we gonna throw this then jump? Azui asked as she hoisted the pile. And no, the one-armed boy replied. If we do, we could electrocute the boat. It needs to be de-dropped when we're airborne. Which means Shiozaki-san will need to carry it. I only got one arm, and I'll need to hold ONTT to Azui-san, and she'll need to hold us both. The plant girl nodded and took the cells as the three ran up topside. Their timing was perfect, as the villains had grown impatient and began attacking the boat as they got on deck. So you quickly grabbed the other two students and jumped for the shore. As they flew, a single big villain leaped from the water to catch them. Before he could grab them, Shiozaki gave a battle cry and threw the mass of batteries at him hard as she could. There was a satisfying crunch, as it impacted his face, and both he and the batteries fell into the water. Izuku watched as the batteries' light turned from green to red before they exploded, releasing a literal flood of electricity through the entire lake. Azui landed as the electricity died down. They looked back and saw all the villains floating, defeated by the power cells. Hope we didn't kill anyone, Izuku grimaced. I doubt it, Tsuyu said as she released her passengers. Come on, we should get back to Aizawa-sensei. Todoroki was looking at the lake from his vantage point in the now frozen landslide zone. He was too far away to have identified the students flying through the air, but he certainly saw the lake light up. It was quite a sight to behold, watching the electricity arc across the entire lake. I wonder if that was Kaminari. Course not, I'm right here you dingus. Todoroki turned to the noise and saw Kaminari was indeed close by. He was sitting on a nearby rock, glaring at Todoroki as one half of his chest was stuck in ice. He seemed to have been caught in the glacial strike that Todoroki used to both stabilize the terrain and disable the villains. It was actually a kind of comedic sight. Apologies, Todoroki approached the half-frozen classmate. I'll get you free in a dash. His sentence was interrupted when a very big fist sent him flying back into a different mass of ice. The impact stunned him a brief moment, barely giving him time to dodge the huge fist aimed at his head. Sliding away, he looked up and saw the villain attacking him was a huge man with spikes jutting from his shoulders and head. The man almost looked like he was covered in stone, though said stone was also glowing red like he was molten underneath. A rock man with a heat quirk. No wonder the ice didn't get him. Nice try, the man rumbled with a sneer, but you can't freeze lava. The man swung his fist again, this time missing Todoroki by a large margin. The UA student threw ice at him, but it melted the moment it contacted the villain. He laughed and charged Todoroki again, ignoring all the ice the student threw at him. Dodging another fist, the icy student glanced at his trapped classmate, who was waving him over with electricity arcing between his fingers. Understanding what he meant, Todoroki sent out an even bigger wave of ice to push the man in Kaminari's direction, but the man just laughed more and smashed through the ice. Todoroki tried to dodge again, but took a solid hit to his shin before collapsing to the ground. He tried standing, but the pain in his leg flared up. Must be broken. Pathetic, the villain gloated. This is why I hate heroes. You're all one-trick ponies. Normally I don't kill kids, but you ain't quite a kid anymore, so. The man laughed as he raised his foot, intent on smashing Todoroki's skull. The student raised his hand to conjure an ice wall, but stopped when a pink and black blur slammed into the villain's face, sending him flying. Stay away from my classmate. Uraraka Ochako screamed as she attacked the villain again. To everyone's surprise, Uraraka's fist sent him sprawling. The two boys knew Uraraka had some combat training, but to see her go all out against the villain was definitely an eye-opening experience. Giving a sidelong glance at Kaminari, the girl slammed her palm against the villain, negating his gravity and sending him flying at the electric kid. The villain gave a snarl when he impacted Kaminari, but that snarl turned into a scream when electricity coursed through his body. He fell to the ground unceremoniously as Uraraka deactivated her quirk. Is everyone okay? Uraraka asked. I think my leg is broken, Todoroki replied. I can't stand. I'm stuck in ice, Kaminari said with less anger than before. Other than that I'm fine. Good. Uraraka pulled Todoroki up, letting him lean on her shoulder as they stumbled towards Kaminari. Thank God I hit my growth spurt. Be kinda hard to do this if I was shorter than you. You used to be short. Kaminari laughed as the other got close enough for Todoroki to melt the ice holding him in place. Once freed, he dashed to Todoroki's other side to help hold him up. We should get back to the main plaza, Uraraka stated. Others might be heading there too. Others were indeed heading to the plaza, as demonstrated by Izuku, Ibara and Tsuyu after their flight from the lake. They had encountered a couple other villains along the way, but they were quickly dispatched by the hero students. As they neared the plaza, they hid behind a nearby boulder to observe the area. There were a lot of villains lying unconscious in a heap, but there were quite a few more still up and active. They weren't doing anything, however. They were all quite a distance away, likely keeping an eye on the entrance. Closer to the group, though, a single, massive villain with black skin and a head like a brainy bird had pinned Aizawa to the ground. The hero wasn't moving. Not far from him were what Izuku assumed were the two ringleaders. One of them was the foggy guy who warped everyone in the first place, the other was a lanky man with pale blue hair who appeared to be covered in hands. And you're sure no one got out? The handman asked. Yes, Fog Guy replied. This class's roster listed 19 students, and I warped 19 individuals. The hand guy laughed maniacally about how things were working out as Izuku gave a quiet sigh of relief. He was one of the warped individuals. That meant they didn't spot Ida. Help would be coming. Now they just needed to figure out how to help Aizawa out from under that Hulk wannabe. 2 hero students and a Gen Ed student with 1 arm versus over 24 villains, a Hulk, Fogman and a freaky guy with a hand fetish. Not good odds. Even worse odds when the boulder they were hiding behind suddenly crumbled and shattered. What do we have here? Hanzi asked as he peered over the rock. 3 little hero students, huh? A frog, a plant, and a bush. Like your hair. The 2 girls took up fighting stances in front of Izuku. They knew he couldn't fight. He knew he couldn't fight, but he couldn't just stand there. As the man gloated and laughed, his eyes fell on a sharp-looking rock nearby. It was just out of reach, and Izuku knew the man would attack the moment he moved, so he waited. For once his past trauma helped here, making him completely still. What are you doing here? Izuku asked. Why'd you attack us? The man looked at Izuku, head cocked to one side. Hell's wrong with your mouth, he asked back. Talk normal, runt. It was at that point Izuku realized something else. The way he had been kneeling this whole time, Hanzi probably didn't notice Izuku's lack of an arm. He remembered one time he escaped Bakugu's bullying by sacrificing his jacket to an explosion, maybe he could do the same thing here, if need be. Whatever, the man continued when Izuku didn't reply. Anyway, we came to kill All Might with my nice pet over there, but the hero isn't here. Totally a waste, so we're getting our kicks killing your teacher. And maybe you too. With a speed one wouldn't have expected from a skinny frame, he lunged at Tsuyu, his open palm aimed right for her face. It was like she was frozen in place as he flew at her. Open palm, fingers extended. He destroyed the boulder using his quirk. Must be like Uraraka's, requiring 5-fingered contact. Izuku couldn't remember the last time he did a fast mental mutter like that, but with his thoughts lined up, he quickly grabbed the sharp rock before shoving Tsuyu out of the way with his left shoulder. Hanzi's fingers clamped down on Izuku's sleeve, grabbing his shoulder in the process. Izuku screamed as pain flared up in that spot, retaliating by stabbing the sharp rock into the villain's hand. Said villain screamed and yanked his hand away, taking Izuku's sleeve with him. At the same time, Izuku jumped back, still holding the sharp rock and hissing as his shoulder bled through the torn jacket. The man sneered as the girls helped pull Izuku back further. At least I got your. His sneer fell when he realized his hand was gripped tighter than it should have been. Looking at the crumbling sleeve in his hand, he finally noticed there wasn't an arm inside of it. Turning back to Izuku, he yelled, "What the fuck happened to your arm?" A long story, Izuku chuckled through his terror. Hanzi yelled in frustration at being tricked before the fog guy from before stepped up. Shigaraki, Izuku heard him whisper, that is not a hero course student. They wouldn't allow a one-armed child to be in heroics, but he is clearly one of those I warped. I fear this means a student may have escaped. Well, there went that surprise. Damn it, the man now known as Shigaraki howled. Damn brat ruin things. Nomu. Kill them. The moment those words were uttered, the Hulk that was pinning Aizawa disappeared and reappeared in front of Izuku. The beast roared as it swung its fist down, and missed. The Hulk, Nomu looked down at the vines wrapped around its arm. Run! Shiozaki yelled as she and Tsuyu rushed the villain. Shigaraki screamed again and reached for the vines before Tsuyu dropkicked him in the head. Go get Aizawa-sensei. Izuku yelled. Driven by something he'd never felt before, Izuku flipped around a rock in his hand, jumped at Nomu, and gave a roar of his own as he stabbed the rock into its eye. Nomu roared and tried to bat Izuku away, but missed due to the loss of depth perception. That didn't last long, as Izuku watched with horror when the beast's eye regenerated right in front of him. More vines wrapped around both Nomu and Shigaraki, almost getting Fog Guy as well, before the three kids rushed for Aizawa. Tsuyu was fastest and reached Aizawa before the others. She started pulling him out before everyone heard snapping sounds behind them. Tsuyu's eyes widened. Izuku turned in time to see Shigaraki lunging at him, palm aimed right for his face. He couldn't dodge this one. Shiozaki was distracted with dodging the freed Nomu, he didn't even have his rock to defend himself. Shigaraki was mere meters from him. Centimeters. Suddenly the sound of shattering glass filled the immediate area. Before anyone could turn toward the noise, 3 fist-sized spheres of ice slammed into Shigaraki. Almost simultaneously Izuku found himself lifted into the air as the area got very cold before he was pulled away from the villains. Before Shigaraki could recover from the ice that hit him, a very large foot kicked him into the Fog Guy, sending them both sprawling. What just happened? Don't worry, Midoriya-kun, a familiar voice spoke in his ear, we got you. Gasping, Izuku looked over his shoulder and saw the person that grabbed him was none other than Kagero Kiana, his winged class president. Looking next to her, he saw a massive ice flow like a giant slide forming from the ground with Moriboshi Aiin standing on top. Next to her were a confused Shiozaki and Tsuyu, the latter of whom was holding Aizawa. Unfortunately, all this noise caught the attention of the villains in the distance, who came rushing back eager to fight. Why you two? He asked. How did dash, not just us, Moriboshi smirked. She pointed further down the slide, and Izuku looked to see more of his classmates. Asano was standing at full height with Sakai looped around her shoulders, at her feet were the spiked Gorogoro Mamoru, Choji Ryanosuke the Wookiee and the rotund Kikushu Hifumi. They all looked pissed. Who are you guys? Tsuyu asked. We're from Class 1C, like Izuku. We lost the signal from him around 12 minutes ago, Kagero explained as she landed next to the hero course students, wincing at the blood on Izuku's jacket. We alerted the teachers, and opted to come ahead to help best we could. Izuku was confused since he didn't destroy the vial, but he was more happy that help was here. Hey hey hey. Shigaraki roared. No fair bringing in extra bosses. Shut it, fingerfucker. Choji yelled as he hoisted a boulder. If anything, you're the boss fight here. See careful. Izuku warned from his spot as Kagero took off her jacket and wrapped it around his shoulder. That guy CC can break things D down if he touches them. Big guy there has SS strength AA and regeneration. They wanted to use him to kill All Might. Did they now? Asano sneered. Well, they'll have to get through us, first. We're Class 1C, bitches. Gorogoro flexed his arms. And you're dead meat. With that declaration, the students from general education rushed forward to meet their foes. Chapter end notes. And thus we see the arrival of Class 1C's Midoriya Protection Squad. You're about to see just how strong they are, including one who didn't apply for heroics. Next chapter is gonna take some time to come out. I want to make a very special picture for it, but I need some materials that are proving hard to find. Trust me, though, the picture will be worth it. Also, I have no doubt some of you have spotted something in this FIC that doesn't quite make sense. Allow me to simply say that its occurrence is the opposite of something I stated in an earlier chapter. I love leaving riddles that make people scratch their heads until they see the answer. Then they go all, oh I get it. Fills me with happy feels. And with that, I bid you ta-ta for now. Cobalt Star also got a recent update, so if you want to see more stuff you can go over there too. Rescue and Resolution Chapter notes Students vs Villains. Warning you now, I decided to change one of the tags up above because, well, you'll see. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Uraraka and Kaminari hurried best they could, carrying the wounded Todoroki between them. With how many times they almost stumbled, Kaminari was tempted to ask Uraraka if she could just carry him piggyback, but decided against it. He would never know how wise this decision was. What weirded them all out, however, was that they hadn't encountered a single villain since they escaped the landslide zone. None of them knew if this was a good thing or a bad thing. Why is it so quiet? Kaminari asked as the trio hustled through a forested area. We were practically swamped back there, but now. Just be grateful we're not being attacked right now, Todoroki sighed. Not sure how well I could fight with one leg. Wonder how everyone else is doing, Uraraka voiced with worry. While they had not run into any villains, they had not run into any classmates either. She could only hope they were just busy with the villains in wherever they landed. She turned to say something else, but stopped when the trio was hit by a sudden cold wind. Before anyone could react, all three students saw a massive, intricately carved fist made of ice shoot up from somewhere past the tree line. They watched as it sent a group of villains flying before crumbling into snow. "That wasn't me," Todoroki deadpanned. "Let's go." Ochako yelled as she swung Todoroki around to carry him bridal style and ran ahead, leaving Kaminari. Said Electrokinetic just watched her disappear between the trees. Damn her and her long legs. As Kaminari struggled to catch up, Uraraka wove her way between the trees with Todoroki holding on tight. With the way she was bounding, he guessed she must have used her quirk to lighten her mass without negating it entirely. Didn't that quirkless boy come up with that idea? Todoroki had to admit, his ideas were beyond clever, but too many relied on his fire. If they both survived, he'd have to ask for more ice-only ideas. Todoroki was shaken from his thoughts when he and Ochako heard a "gah" as another villain face-planted the ground in front of them. Breaking through the tree line, the two students saw a bewildering sight. There was an actual horde of villains in the main plaza, definitely more than half what came through the weird mist portal earlier. In their midst were a bunch of UA students fighting back. Uraraka and Todoroki recognized Tsuyu, Ojiro and Kirishima, but the majority of them were unknowns for the most part. They recognized the tall girl who was swinging a villain like a baseball bat from lunch the previous day. There was also a fat kid who seemed to be able to flatten himself, then inflate back to normal with enough force to knock back anyone around him. On the opposite end of the plaza they saw a giant snake and a boy with spikes fighting a big bird-headed villain with an exposed brain. With all of this going on, there was a white-haired girl shooting fist-shaped Chu NKS of ice at villains as she circled the plaza on a small iceberg. It was a literal battlefield. What did we miss? Uraraka asked. Uraraka-san. Todoroki-kun. Both students turned and saw Shiozaki running up to meet them, only stopping to wrap another villain in her vines. "I am glad to see you are well." "I don't think having a broken leg counts as being well," Todoroki replied. "What is all this?" "A group of students from Midoriya's class came to render aid," the religious hero student explained. Somehow he was able to get a signal out to alert UA. She ducked her head to avoid a villain sent flying by Asano before continuing. "Midoriya himself is on top of the tallest ice pillar over there, with Aizawa-sensei and another student from his class. Aizawa-sensei was wounded by the big brain villain and is incapacitated." As she finished, the group saw one villain was climbing the pillar in question and neared the top before a large white wing batted him off the side. Initially it was only Azuri-san and myself aiding them, but Ojiro-kun and Kirishima-kun arrived a few minutes ago. "That's a lot to take in," Uraraka stated. She kind of wanted to join in and contribute to the fight, but with everything going on and the wounded classmate in her arms she was having trouble finding a place she could actually help. She got her answer when she heard a youthful scream of pain. The three students turned toward the noise and gasped at what they saw. The big villain had laid a heavy blow on the Spike Kid, smashing him into the ground. The snake bit the villain's shoulder hard before being torn off and hurled aside. Uraraka noticed the villain slowed down considerably after that, but was still moving in for the kill. "Put me down," Todoroki tried to push his way out of Ochako's arms. "You two go help them, I can provide cover." The girl with the gravity quirk nodded and gently set her classmate down before she and Shiozaki began running towards the big villain. As they ran, Todoroki held his right hand to the ground. Working on one of the few ice-only tricks Midoriya had devised for him, Todoroki created a thin layer of ice a few centimeters under the soil and extended it out across the plaza. Using this layer, Shoto raised pillars of ice that slammed into any villain that got too close. There weren't too many villains that got close, though, as most of the villains were fighting the Gen Ed students. A couple villains tried going after Todoroki directly, but either met with more ice or were sent flying after getting bowled into by one of Asano's victims. After a minute the girls reached their target, in time to see the snake bite him again, this time in the leg. The villain slowed down further, giving Shiozaki ample opportunity to wrap them in her vines. Simultaneously, Ochako reached down and pulled the spiky kid out of his hole in the ground. The boy was unsteady and bled from multiple injuries, but managed to stay upright with the help of Uraraka and his serpentine classmate. "You doing okay?" Uraraka asked. "What's the big guy's quirk?" "Quirks," Gorogoro said between breaths. "Regeneration, super strength," Sakai listed, "and during our fight we noticed his muscles were tougher than most, so we think he may have shock absorption as well." The snake looked back at the villain that was wrapped in vines. "My venom slowed him down, but I think his regeneration is letting him adapt to multiple doses. We need a more surefire way to incapacitate him." "I have a way," Uraraka nodded. "Who here is the physically strongest?" Before either boy could answer, there was a scream as a villain was sent flying into the nearby wall. Ochako turned and saw Asano still standing tall and sending the remaining villains flying. Okay, her. Hey, big girl. Asano turned to Uraraka, holding an unconscious villain in her hand. Gonna need you to hit this guy hard as you can when I give the signal. Turning and dashing to the villain, she slapped his face hard before nodding to Shiozaki. The plant girl nodded back and released her vines. As she did this, Asano tossed aside the villain in her hand and turned to Moriboshi, who was still surfing around. Moriboshi, Asano called out over the remaining villains and the other hero students, I need a hammer. The ice girl nodded before sliding over to the ice pillar closest to Todoroki. This yours? She asked. Confused, Todoroki only nodded. Not bad. Borrowing it. She placed her hand against the pillar and closed her eyes. Todoroki watched in awe as his ice pillar slowly changed shape. It grew taller and more slender, gaining what looked like intricate carvings. He was so drawn into watching this process he almost didn't see a small group of villains dashing right for them. Fortunately, Ojiro and Kirishima slammed into them. Whatever you're doing, go faster. Ojiro hollered as he held one villain in a chokehold. It's harder using ice I didn't make. Moriboshi yelled back as she kept changing the ice. I'd make my own, but I'm iced out. As she reshaped the ice, Todoroki saw a familiar black cloud appear behind her head. His eyes widened as a hand emerged from it, poised to grab Moriboshi's head. He moved to stop the hand and gave a shout of surprise, not wanting to know what would happen if that hand got her. Unfortunately, he wound up learning as Moriboshi created a wall of ice behind her to stop the hand, only for the ice to crumble around it. Moriboshi looked back with eyes of terror, literally frozen in place. Todoroki staggered upright and lunged for the hand, trying to create his own ice to knock it away while Ojiro and Kirishima finally noticed what was happening and moved to intervene. It was too close. He was too slow. The hand was centimeters from touching her. Before he reached it, however, the gate suddenly closed and he could hear a distant scream as the arm fell to the ground at the ice girl's feet. The act of closing the portal had severed that arm. Both ice students stared at the fallen appendage in a mix of shock and disgust. Ojiro just stared with wide eyes while Kirishima straight up vomited. Todoroki almost joined him. He didn't know it, but Uraraka had also been watching the formation of the ice hammer while holding the zero-gravity Hulk in place above the ground. She had seen the portal form and recognized it. Looking around quickly, she saw the two head villains from before, including the one who could create the portals. Narrowing her eyes, she leaned down and picked up a large rock. With the sort of precision that could only come from spending years skipping stones across lakes, she hurled the stone at the portal guy hard as she could. Her finger hurt after the throw, but she was rewarded with a direct hit to his head, knocking him down and out. She did not expect the act to result in a severed limb. The sight of the villain bleeding like that, and knowing it was her fault, was almost too much for her and she almost lost control of her quirk. Fortunately, at that same moment Moriboshi finished reshaping Todoroki's ice. The three boys stared at her creation in awe. It wasn't just a hammer, it was covered in precise and intricate carvings. It was a piece of art. They kept staring as Moriboshi used her quirk to send the ice hammer flying to Asano before falling to her knees. At that point Todoroki noticed her hair was matted in ice and snowflakes. Perhaps she wasn't completely immune to her own cold, either. In a moment of compassion, Todoroki set his left hand on her head and used a little bit of his fire side to help warm her up. Looking at him in surprise, she quickly nodded her gratitude as he warmed her up. Meanwhile, Asano caught the hammer and gave it a few spins before turning to the still-floating Nomu. With a smile more befitting the villains she had spent the last 5 minutes beating up, she rushed at the Hulk and gave a battle cry as she swung with all her might. The resulting impact shattered the hammer, but also sent the beast speeding through the air. Uraraka negated her quirk after hearing it break through the glass of the dome. With her quirk released, Ochako fell to her knees and took deep breaths. With the departure of the Nomu, the fighting finally died down. The hand villain managed to succeed in rousing his portal-making compatriot, but they were met by the angry and determined glares of the students. No other villain was on their feet. Fuck, I think we lost, the dismembered villain whined. Stupid heroes and their dash, his words were cut off as the doors to the USJ were slammed off their hinges and sent flying across the plaza. Everyone turned to the source of the noise, each side hoping it wasn't an enemy. Everything is alright now. A massive form appeared at the top of the stairs. The students all gave smiles and sighs of relief as they saw who it was. Because I am here. All Might had arrived on the scene, and he was not smiling. If anything, he looked downright pissed. He saw the students, both Hero Course and Gen Ed. He saw they were injured and exhausted. He saw the two remaining villains, and how one of them was bleeding profusely. Looking to his left, he could see the pillar that Midoriya, Kagero and Aizawa were huddled on top of. No one said a word after his announcement, but the silence was broken by a massive amount of electricity erupted from the forested area behind Shigaraki and Kurojiri. We definitely cannot win now, Kurojiri muttered to Shigaraki. I advise we retreat. No fair, Shigaraki hissed as he held his stump of a right arm. Our Nomu was defeated before All Might even got here. Our troops were beaten by NPCs. Fine. He turned to All Might and roared, you and your little brats win this time, All Might, but the League of Villains will kill you. As he finished, a big portal appeared behind him and both villains retreated before All Might could reach them. With their retreat, the fighting had officially ended. Ida had returned with other teachers not long after the fighting stopped, and with him came the medics. It took some time, but all the students were accounted for and were receiving treatment for their injuries. Everyone had also been questioned about what happened, and they all explained what they could. The students who explained the most were Azui, Shiozaki and Midoriya, who had been present for the majority of the villain's speech. Izuku was relieved to hear none of the villains he had incapacitated with the shock bomb had drowned, and was even more glad to hear none of the students had died either. Aizawa and 13, however, had been gravely injured and would likely remain hospitalized for some time. Once the medics cleared everyone, Izuku was rushed by his classmates. They were beyond worried for him, and wanted to make sure he was alright. Izuku assured them that he was alright and actually relatively unharmed. However, there was one more bit of unpleasantness that had to be sorted out. Something that filled the Gen Ed students with dread. They broke a lot of rules, and had to answer for them. Rather than be taken back to the main buildings, the present students of Class 1C, including Izuku, were instructed to wait in the USJ until Nedzu arrived. There was a slight chuckle as the mammalian principal drove up in a scaled-down Cadillac, but no one laughed as he approached with Midnight in tow. He had his trademark grin, but Midnight looked less happy. All the Gen Ed students stood in a line in front of these two teachers, nervously fidgeting with whatever they could. You caused a bit of havoc, Nedzu finally spoke up after minutes of silence. There is a literal bridge of ice connecting the 1C classroom to this facility, and ice scattered throughout the main plaza down below. That does not even cover the fact that the school went on lockdown the moment we received the distress signal, and you students chose to come fight. We understand your reasoning, Midnight added, and we know you wanted to help protect Midoriya and the other students, but you kids haven't received any combat training while at UA. Your quirks might be powerful, but these were legitimate villains. You could have died. Midoriya is exempt since he was already here, but the rest of you should have known better. The students stayed silent. There was nothing they could say to excuse their actions. Even Izuku was feeling particularly morose after that. He was worried what would happen to his classmates. He felt bad they came to rescue him, and now were going to be punished for it. None of you are being expelled, Nedzu continued, but you will still need to be punished for this violation. Nedzu went silent, clearly thinking of a suitable punishment. The students were afraid of what he was thinking, dreading what he would decide. After a minute, he turned back to the students with a smile. I know. As punishment, you must clean up all the ice. Every piece from here to the main building must be gone, and you cannot go home until it is achieved. That surprised them. On one hand, that was a lot of ice. On the other, they had Moriboshi. They knew that, when rested, she'd be able to clear the ice in no time at all using her quirk. The principal must have known that as well. I know you can clear it quickly, Nedzu said, confirming their belief. The reason for such a lenient punishment is because I'm truly not mad at all. Taking in their widening eyes, the tiny principal continued, while you may have broken at least a half-dozen rules, you did it with the intent to do good. Now, normally I am not an ends justify the means sort of individual, but you are also students. You are in the process of learning how to do things, driven by emotion above all else. You heard your friend was in danger, and rushed to help. That is a very heroic mindset. Just be sure to rein it in next time, alright? The students nodded. Excellent. Midoriya, you will return to the main building with Midnight. I will remain here to supervise your classmates. With that, Class 1C gave Midoriya one last hug before Midnight pulled him towards the doors. The two clambered into the remaining automated bus and sat side by side. When it started going, Midnight pulled Izuku into a tight hug. I am so sorry, she whispered. I promised I'd keep you safe, and you got attacked your first week here. I'm so sorry, Izuku. Izuku could hear the remorse in her voice, and though flustered by how close his face was to her chest, he reciprocated the hug best he could. It's alright, Midnight, he replied after a moment. You didn't know it would happen. P+, I was with hero students. They helped save me, T2. The two stayed in the hug, neither willing to move. After a few minutes, Izuku tightened his hug and gasped. Izuku? Midnight asked with worry. MA's gonna kill me, the student stated. I lost her DD desk in the lake. Be back there. Midnight stared at her student in surprise for a few moments before laughing and pulling him closer. If he was worried over something small like that, he was gonna be alright. Now she just had to figure out how to explain this to Inko. At the same time Midoriya was being suffocated by Midnight's generous bust, there was a small bar a few towns over that was occupied by a misty barkeep, an annoyed doctor and a screaming villain. Against one wall was a television with a camera on top. Displayed on the TV was a man that, if you knew him, would qualify as living nightmare fuel. It's not fair. Shigaraki yelled as his stub was being tended to. We lost the fight before All Might even got there. They had more NPCs than we thought, and they were way powerful. It's like they were keeping secret weapons or something. An interesting twist, the man on the TV replied. Did they happen to say who they were? They identified themselves as Class 1C, Kurojiri explained. According to the records, 1C is a general education class. They should not have received combat training, and yet so many of them were quite proficient at it. I'm gonna kill them. Shigaraki declared after his arm was finally wrapped in bandages. I'm gonna hunt down those brats and kill them all. Calm yourself, the man on the TV ordered, silencing Shigaraki immediately. While losing the Nomu was a hard hit, we can still learn from this event. We've learned that the hero courses aren't the only ones with students prepped for battle, and we know that having 100 minions does no good if they're all so weak. With this in mind, Shigaraki, I want you to focus on rebuilding the league's numbers. However, rather than focus on quantity, I want you to focus on quality. Bring in a few powerful members. They defeated us with a handful of strong individuals, let us show we can do the same to them. I will, Shigaraki sneered. I'll get people better than those brats. More powerful. And they will kill them. Shigaraki gave a laugh, but winced and held his right shoulder. But first, I'm gonna need a new arm. It was the morning of the following day. There was a public announcement stating that school was cancelled so the students could recuperate from the incident, so Izuku was exploiting this by sleeping in. True, he still woke up before 8 due to sudden phantom pains in his shoulder, but he lay in bed thinking about everything. He had been in UA less than a week. Less than a week, and already so much stuff had happened. He had actual friends, his teachers actually looked out for him, he was receiving hero training, and almost died from a large-scale villain attack. Even with that last part, he had to admit his first week of UA was so much better than the previous 10 years of his life. He also had to admit last night was pretty fun, too. Midnight had actually escorted him home, and then hung around a few hours while his mom hugged him half to death. Not long after that, Kamui Woods had dropped by to make sure he was alright, and the night turned into an impromptu game night between the Midoriyas and the heroes. Izuku gave a small laugh when he remembered the look on Kamui's face at multiple points during their game. The pro heroes had walked away with the knowledge to never play Takedo with his mom and expect to win. He was shaken from his thoughts when he heard someone knocking on the front door of the apartment. That was weird, they weren't expecting anyone. Figuring it might have been important, he got up and quickly got dressed. This turned out to be a good idea, as he threw on a t-shirt just as there was knocking on his bedroom door. Izuku, Inko asked through the wood, are you up? Right here, Izuku replied as he opened the door. What's going on? Your principal is here to see you, his mom explained with a smile. He brought someone with him, too. I'm gonna cook breakfast for everyone. Izuku nodded and quickly jogged to the living room. The minute he turned the corner, he saw Nedzu sitting on the couch between the pile of Izuku's notebooks, he was wondering if he'd ever get those back, and the other guest. Izuku froze in place the moment he saw the other person. The new person was a girl he did not recognize. Despite her height she looked kind of young, like someone who was just on the edge of adulthood. She had long blonde hair, but in the light it shimmered like fine golden thread. Her eyes were like polished turquoise behind a pair of thin eyeglasses, and beheld him with a soft gaze. Her skin was of a fair complexion, unmarred by freckles or markings. She wore a white dress shirt with pink cuffs under a raspberry red waist coat that accentuated her curves. She also wore gray capri pants, under which were plaid socks that matched colors with her shirt and waistcoat, along with sturdy-looking brown boots. Never before had Izuku seen what he could only describe as a paragon of beauty. Her eyes widened a bit as her gaze fell on his shoulder, but he was too stunned to notice. Good morning, Midoriya. Nedzu greeted, breaking Izuku from his stupor. I'm sorry if this seems unexpected, but I did tell you that I would be introducing you to someone this morning, and I didn't think it would be a problem to keep my word despite this meeting not occurring in school. It's fine, the short green kid stated as he sat in the armchair across from the two. And may I ask who this is? This, Nedzu gestured to the girl, is Melissa Shield. Daughter of the famous David Shield, and transfer student for Class 3H support course. Nezu then turned to Melissa, "Good God, what a beautiful name," and said, "Melissa, this is Midoriya Izuku of Class 1C General Education course. He has been chosen to receive specialized hero training." "A pleasure to meet you," Melissa greeted with a smile. If Midoriya had not already been sitting, he might have fallen to the floor. To his ears, her voice was like the chime of a glass bell, her smile as beautiful as freshly fallen snow at night. Izuku could not remember feeling this flustered even around midnight. "Now, Melissa," Nezu continued as he hopped off the couch and walked towards Izuku, "I've heard you've been acing literally every assignment Power Loader has thrown at you, correct?" This question caught both students by surprise, but Melissa nodded. "I heard you've been acing them in record time, too. Which is why I want you to help us with this." "Us?" Izuku asked. Instead of a response, Nezu stood next to Izuku and gestured to his left shoulder. "As you can see, Melissa, young Midoriya is missing a little something. And I want you to fix that." Once again, both students were caught by surprise. "Why you mean?" "Correct," Nezu said with a glint in his eye. "I want you to make Midoriya a prosthetic arm that is fit for combat." Chapter end notes. I sure hope you guys enjoyed that battle. I wanted to make a picture for it, but things kinda fell through. Oh well, maybe next time. And now we see the main girl. I knew everyone was waiting for this. Next time we'll have some bonding or dialogue between the two kids, we meet one or two new people, and next chapter will likely end on the sort of cliffhanger that folks who read Cobalt Star are used to seeing. In other words, the sort to make you all scream in anger. XD until next time. Resolution History Chapter notes. You're gonna hate me at the end of this. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Izuku sat in a daze. He was gonna get a new arm. A new left arm. After everything that happened, he could barely remember what it felt like having one of those. What would it be like? Was it gonna look like something from an anime? Or maybe something like he'd seen in the support course workshops. He hoped it wouldn't be too bulky. It would be awkward if it were so heavy he walked lopsided. There were more questions bouncing around his skull, but they were all derailed when he noticed Melissa had picked up his right arm and was looking at it, very, closely. What are you?" Izuku meekly asked. His face felt very warm at just how close the tall American girl was. She looked up at him and gave a soft smile that made him more flustered. "Just giving your arm a close look," she replied with her glass bell voice. "I'll be taking more precise measurements back at school, where I actually have tools, but observations made here can give me an idea of what sort of arm to make you. Has to be combative, but not obtrusive." She gave his arm a slight squeeze, eliciting a shy squeak from Izuku, before continuing, "You're not too muscular right now, so I can't make it too heavy. What sort of fighting style do you think you'll be using?" Izuku spoke through his blushing. Nezu and Sir Nitai were talking about teaching MHA how to fight WW with weapons, and utilizing my SS speed. This seemed to pique her interest, making her look him in the eyes. "Weapons?" she asked. "Will they complement your quirk?" No. Izuku turned away, looking down for a moment before looking back to Melissa. Wait, may I ask what your Q quirk is?" Melissa looked at him, then gave a smile as she started writing in her notebook. "Take a guess," she challenged. Izuku looked at her best he could. Pushing past her beauty, he noted she lacked any form of physical alterations, so it was likely an emitter-type quirk. Since she was apparently acing her course. Something along the lines of technopathy, he asked after a minute. She smiled, and shook her head. Oh. High intelligence. Another headshake. Good vision. Denied. Elemental C command. A laugh and a denial. This continued for another minute or two, with Izuku going through his mental list of possible quirks and her denying it. Eventually he sighed and drooped his shoulders. What is your quirk?" he asked in defeat. Melissa simply smiled again, reached into her wallet and pulled out her ID card. Izuku looked at it, specifically the lower right corner. There was a small box in that corner that had one of two symbols in it. If someone had a quirk, this box would have a big green Q in it where the bottom line would turn sharply upward like a check mark. Next to the box would then say the quirk's name and a quick summary of its effects. However, if the person was quirkless, the Q would be red, and instead of a check mark the bottom line would go down a bit further with another short line going perpendicular through it, turning the bottom line into an X. It was a symbol Izuku was all too familiar with. It was a symbol he hated, knowing that so many people would think he was less than human because of it. It was the same symbol that was on Melissa's ID. Izuku stared in shock a few seconds longer before Melissa took her ID back, calmly putting it away. Then he stared at her in amazement. An amazing person, a beautiful lady, and she was Q quirkless. Yup, she smiled. I'm among the few without powers. Admittedly, America has a higher percentage of quirkless, and indeed many of our heroes are the same. That's why we've got a bigger focus on support gear and technology. Oh, Izuku vocalized. I wish quirkless H here in Japan were treated that nicely. He gave a weak chuckle and stopped, realizing he had subconsciously started rubbing his left shoulder. He quickly set his arm back down, but the look on Melissa's face said it all. With that sentence and gesture, she figured out he was quirkless, and lost his arm because of it. Oh my god, she whispered. It's in the past. Izuku tried to explain it away. Really? Nothing to worry about. Melissa stared a bit longer before flipping to another page in her notebook and writing something really fast. Izuku was worried about what she was writing, but noted her face was one of grim determination. Hopefully it was a good thing. While Melissa and Izuku were in the living room going over things, Nezu and Inko had moved into the kitchen. Inko prepared tea for them both and sat across the kitchen table from the principal. I have to thank you for doing this, Inko spoke as she sat down. Honestly, after everything that happened over the past year, I'm glad to see Izuku genuinely smile again. Everything that happened over the past year is the failings of society, Nezu admitted. With Japan's discrimination against quirkless, I knew a case like your son's would happen eventually. I had been keeping an eye out, catching what I could before any lasting damage was done. He gave an ashamed sigh. I am truly sorry for what happened to your son. You don't need to apologize, the mother smiled. Izuku's dream has always been to be a hero, to help people. Just when he had given up on that dream, when he was at his lowest, you came and pulled him back up. I think you were the first supportive voice he had before now. She looked down in her own shame. Even I wasn't as supportive as I should have been. There were a few seconds of silence as the two adults sipped their tea. I'd like your son to see the school therapist, Nezu stated. I know he had to undergo physical therapy after the incident, but I saw something yesterday morning that proved he needs more mental therapy as well. It's covered by the school, so you don't need to worry about payments. I am grateful, Inko set her cup down, but I've been curious for the past week. Hero training, making him a prosthetic for free, now therapy. Does your school normally bend over backwards like this for students? Nezu stared a moment before giving a laugh. No, Nezu admitted, but like I said, your son has suffered a lot and the best I can do is help him out of it. Plus, I kind of see myself in him. Brilliant, noble, maybe a tad bit more modesty, and completely ostracized by society because of something outside of his control. It took me literally decades to get accepted by the Hero Union, and even nowadays some citizens refuse to accept the fact an animal like me can be a hero. So, if I can help someone who's also suffered get up faster, I most certainly will. Especially if they have the makings of a genuine hero. He took another sip, enjoying the flavor of his tea. This is quite delicious. You must tell me the brand. Family recipe, Inko beamed. Nezu chuckled and the two adults continued drinking in silence. Todoroki lay on his futon, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom. His father was at work, and he was permitted to do only lighter drills today due to his healing leg. This is what gave him the free time he was currently enjoying. As he felt the ache in his leg, he thought back to the previous day. The USJ was his first actual experience fighting villains, and that one lava villain almost got him. He would have to train his ice side harder. He never wanted to feel so weak again. While his thoughts were on his ice quirk, he remembered that ice girl from the general education class. He recalled how she was almost gliding around the area. How she took his ice and reshaped it into a weapon for her friend. How she could make ice float in the air without making it into snow. Her use of that quirk was beyond anything he imagined possible with his own. Seeing what she could do, seeing just how easily it came to her, even just seeing her. Beautiful. He shot to his feet, then staggered back onto his bed because his leg was still aching. After a minute, he got up a bit more calmly and walked to the computer in his room. He overheard that girl's name was Moriboshi. The school would keep her address secret, but the online phone book would no doubt have her address listed. All he had to do was look through the list of Moriboshi names living in town and he could find her in no time. He knew Moriboshi could not be that common a name, so that list shouldn't be one name. Todoroki stared at his computer screen, bewildered at what he saw. Mizurufu was a large city, well over 100,000 people living there, and there was only one family with the last name Moriboshi. It really wasn't a common name, huh? After making sure it was the right Moriboshi, Todoroki quickly grabbed his bag and a nondescript hat. Making sure all his hair was under his hat, he quickly jogged through the halls of his massive house and out the door. No one was home, so he didn't need to tell anyone where he was going. He also knew his dad would be furious if they learned where he was going, but he didn't care. He was a man on a mission. One weekend later. And after everything calmed down, Melissa told Izuku, "My classmate looks at the goat and says, 'I won't tell anyone if you won't,' before just walking away." Izuku almost stumbled from laughing so hard at the end of her story. The two of them were walking down the hall towards the support course workshops, with Principal Nedzu in front of them. Izuku was fully recovered from what happened in the USJ, though he wasn't able to get a replacement jacket yet, so he came wearing the one with some bloodstains and a disintegrated sleeve. Izuku was still laughing by the time they reached the workshops, and Nedzu raised his paw to knock on the door before the door opened on its own. "Good God, Mito-chan," Mei smiled as she stepped out, "I could hear you laughing from." Her gaze fell on Melissa and she stopped talking. She slowly looked the American girl up and down before turning to Izuku while gesturing to Melissa. "Mito-chan, who is this titan?" "This," Nedzu stepped in to explain, "is Melissa Shield, a third-year transfer student." "Melissa, this is Mei, the girl I told you about over the weekend." "Principal, why are you telling people about me?" Mei asked. "I don't even have any babies to demonstrate yet." "Babies?" the tall American asked. "Her inventions," the small boy explained. "Because," Nedzu clapped his paws together, "Melissa here will be spearheading a particular project that I want you to help her out with. She is going to be making a combat-capable prosthetic for Midoriya." At the conclusion of his words, Mei stared at Melissa for a few seconds before turning and staring at Izuku. After a few seconds of silence, Mei gave a happy scream, startling everyone, before pulling Izuku into a tight hug and spinning around. "Congrats, Mito-chan." Mei cheered as she kept spinning Izuku around, his head held tight into her shoulder. "You're getting a new arm, and I'm gonna help make it. It's gonna be so awesome. I'll add blades and a tripwire and maybe a hack module and dash, Mei, please." Nedzu laughed as Melissa stared in total shock. "Let the boy down before you break something." Mei gave a few more spins before setting Izuku down, chuckling as the small boy wobbled on his feet. Everyone took this opportunity to, finally, enter the workshop while Izuku staggered in behind them and collapsed in a stool. Nedzu and Mei helped Melissa unload the various papers and notes she was carrying in her bag. As Melissa got them arranged nice and neat, Izuku gasped and straightened up. "Mei," he stuttered, "there's something I need to tell you." The inventor turned as Izuku got to his feet and bowed. I lost the desk you made me last week. I lost it in a LL Lake area during the villain attack. I am so sorry." He started tearing up a bit. I know why you worked so hard on it, and I lost it on the first day you gave it to me," and his apologies ceased when Mei hugged him tight. This wasn't the same sort of hug she gave earlier that ended with her spinning him around. This hug was a warm, comforting one. "Don't worry," Mei whispered into his ear. "Your life is more important than any device in this lab. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you." Izuku teared up a bit more at her words and returned the hug best he could. They held the hug for a few more moments before Mei pulled away and gave a trademark smile. "Honestly, Mito-chan, I wanted to talk to you about that desk. Gimme a minute." She hopped off, past Melissa and Nedzu, and reached down behind her table. After a moment she straightened with a smile and exclaimed "Tada," as she held up a certain contraption Izuku recognized instantly. The desk," he gasped. How did you we're a hero school, Mito-chan." Mei laughed as she walked over with the desk and started putting on the smaller boy. "I heard what happened, tracked the energy from the vial, hired a fish kid from management to retrieve it. You know," Nedzu turned from helping Melissa arranging notes, "you still need to tell me how you managed to duplicate the red matter after seeing it once." "Classified." Mei giggled as she clipped the last strap for Izuku. "All done, Mito-chan. Now get to class. I don't want to know what midnight would do if you're late." Izuku nodded, gave Mei a quick half-hug and dashed out the door. Once he was gone, Mei clapped her hands and turned to Melissa and Nedzu. "Okay, what are we dealing with?" "I was thinking of something like this," Melissa pointed at one of the pages. "Not bulky, but definitely not the uncanny valley sort of limbs that America used to make before they reached the logical conclusion that they looked creepy. Plus, with this design, we can hide a few weapons for him, like stopping you right there," Mei interrupted as she pointed at one page that detailed small flashbangs. "None of these. Nothing explosive around Mito-chan, he has PTSD involving explosions. This, on the other hand." It was almost lunchtime, and Izuku had spent the last hour and a half with Class 1A. Since they couldn't do the exercises in the USJ, it had been decided Izuku would work with them during the pre-lunch study period to see if there was any other way to improve their quirks. Aizawa looked like a mummy and was snoozing on the floor as Izuku was finishing up with Yaoyorozu. "It looks like the amount of lipids you used up is less dependent on the mass of the C creation," Izuku stated, "but rather the materials the object is made from. Try creating things using CC ceramics instead of M metals in the future and record the drain for those." If you ever need to CC create something particularly complicated but one-time use, might be more feasible to use lighter materials to retain more energy. I see, Momo nodded in agreement. I'll start small with like knives and stuff. She gave a smile. You are definitely hero material, Midoriya-kun. Anyone who told you otherwise was gravely mistaken. Izuku chuckled and blushed at the compliment as everyone else gathered their belongings to head to lunch. Once they opened the door, however, Class 1A found the way blocked. What's going on? Izuku asked as he got up. He had to get on his tiptoes to look over everyone's shoulders, but he could see a literal horde of people was blocking the doorway. It took a moment, but he recognized a lot of them as students from Class 1B. He also saw Monoma was at the front of the group, looking as snobby as ever. We came to see the famous Class 1A, he sneered to Kirishima. Honestly, I'm not that impressed. Bet you guys feel all high and mighty because you fought some villains, huh? Think you're all that? Excuse me. Everyone in the hallway froze at the voice, while the students in the classroom turned with confused expressions as Izuku squeezed between everyone to address the Class B student directly. No one in Class 1A had ever really heard him shout like that, and they were kind of worried he might explode if he did it again. Why you think we're happy WWE got attacked? Izuku asked. Why you think we're glad WWE almost died? See, cause that's what happened back there, and oh my god, one of the Class B students, whom Izuku recognized as Tetsu, exclaimed. Everyone turned to him in confusion as he raised his hand and pointed at Izuku. What happened? Izuku was initially confused until he noticed the student was pointing at his side, where the bloodstains from last week were still fairly prevalent on his jacket. Oh, he explained, AA villain K kinda disintegrated my sleeve, and I haven't been able to get a replacement coat yet. Dude, another student gasped, you lost your freaking arm and you're more worried about your jacket. Wait, what? Izuku snapped his gaze back to the students. To lose your arm and come back so quickly, Tetsu started tearing up, I've never seen anyone so manly. And no, that's not we were wrong. Another Class B student, whom Izuku recognized from the folders as Yorashi Inesa, yelled. Truly he is what all us hero students aspire to be. The other students loudly agreed, clearly moved by what they perceived to be Izuku's bravery and nobility. The only one who didn't share the sentiment was Monoma, whose eye twitched a bit as he tried to recover the situation. And maybe so, Monoma started, but it's not like they Monoma, Aizawa appeared from behind the Class A kids. You may not have come to cause a physical altercation, but you are clearly trying to harass your fellow students. I'm pretty sure Principal Nedzu warned you about this after you were thrown from the cafeteria last week. Monoma paled as Aizawa continued. I'm pretty sure today qualifies as strike 2. You know enough about baseball to know what happens when you hit strike 3, right? Instead of answering, Monoma just turned and fled. A few seconds later, the rest of the students dispersed, finally clearing the door. I lost my arm a year ago. Izuku told empty air. He stood there as the other Class 1A students exited the room, shaken from his confused stupor when he felt a hand pat his shoulder. Giving a jump of surprise, he turned and saw Uraraka leaning down to his level. Wanna come eat lunch with us? She asked. You're practically a classmate already. Izuku replied, blushing a bit at how close Uraraka was. I was gonna eat with my classmates, since I haven't actually shared a lunch with them for a while. He fidgeted nervously for a second when he saw Uraraka pout before continuing, but I don't think they'd mind if you ate with us. That brought a smile back to her face. Dang, looking at her she was almost as pretty as Melissa. With a nod from Uraraka, Izuku smiled and started walking back to Class 1C with her. The minute they approached the door, however, it slid open with a bang. Standing in the doorway was a female student neither of them recognized. Ochako stood tall at 182 centimeters, but this other girl was even taller. She had a pair of small horns jutting from the sides of her head just above the ears. Her skin was fair, but there were emerald scales up the sides of her face and disappearing into her dark blue hair. She looked down at the two students with deep red eyes full of disinterest before turning back to the class. Oscar, she called with a husky voice. See coming, the mouse's student replied as he approached. With a nod from the new girl, the two exited the class and walked down the hall, away from the cafeteria. Once she was gone, Izuku and Ochako stepped into the classroom. Welcome back, Midoriya-kun, Hojo, the girl with the long tongue, greeted. Who was that? Izuku asked. Maria Draconis, Tabata replied as he stretched his arms. Daughter of the CEO of Draconis Industries, second-year management student. Oscar eats with her all the time, Yoshio cleaned his four-lensed glasses. You must not have seen her yet because your lunches have been elsewhere. Who's the girl you're with? Hayashida smirked as his purple hair flapped without a breeze. She's pretty. This is Uraraka Ochako, F from 1A, Izuku explained as Ochako gave a slight bow. She was wondering if she could eat with us. Of course. Asano smiled. We got no qualms with hero kids, and I recognize her from the USJ. She's fine by me. After hearing this, the rest of the students gave their agreement, and soon the class plus Ochako made the trek to the cafeteria. Grabbing their food, they picked a corner of the cafeteria for themselves and sat down chatting away. After a minute, Azui and Shiozaki joined them, followed quickly by Kaminari, who had apparently befriended Choji the Wookiee during a part of the USJ incident that no one else had seen. Izuku looked around as they ate. There he was, surrounded by friendly faces chattering away happily. He spied Azui had joined Yoshio in a game of Steal Tabata's Shrimp unnoticed, while Kagero was regaling Shiozaki and Uraraka with some of the stuff Class 1C did. He may not have been talking to anyone, but he wasn't being ignored either. Sometimes someone would turn to ask him to affirm a statement, other times someone would ask him to pass a condiment. He was in a group. He belonged. The feeling he got from this was a happy feeling he would never take for granted. Looking up from his lunch, he saw a flash of gold in the doorway of the cafeteria. Turning towards it, he saw it was Melissa peering into the room with Mei by her side. After a moment, Mei spotted Izuku and distinctly pointed at him before walking over, followed by Melissa. In Melissa's arms were a notebook and a few loose pages. Izuku cleared the seat next to him. Ochako had been sitting in the one on his other side, giving Melissa a place to sit as she arrived. Hey, Midoriya-kun, she greeted, I just need to ask you a few things. Who are you? Azui asked as Tabata stole one of her shrimps. Melissa shield, Mei smiled as she sat in a chair across from Melissa. I'm Hatsune Mei. We're both support course, and we're making Mido-chan's new arm. Oh, he told us about that. Hayashida smiled big, the air around him suddenly smelling of cinnamon. Midoriya-kun, you didn't tell us you were on good terms with 3 beautiful ladies. Don't be so greedy. This got a laugh from the class as Izuku turned beet red and stammered a defense. Anyway, Melissa smiled as the laughing died down, I wanted to show you what Mei and I have planned for your arm, but first I need to ask you a question. For the record, Mei raised her hand, I tried to deter her, but the American is persistent. What do you need to know? He asked nervously. If Mei had tried to stop her, this could only mean the question was gonna be awkward. I would like to know how you lost your arm, Melissa replied. If you could tell me that, I could design the arm with better defenses to prevent it being lost in a similar fashion. Now, hold on, Sakai slithered from his chair to stand, next to Izuku, that's a bit of a personal question. You can't just ask that out of the dash, it's okay, Izuku interrupted. All of Class C fell silent at that, watching as Izuku took a few breaths. I think it'd be safe for me to tell you all, B but I'm only gonna say it once. I am not gonna give names, B but this is more for your safety than theirs. I don't want any of you to get arrested F for attempted murder. What do you mean, attempted? Mei's eyes narrowed. She already knew the name of the culprit, but it seemed like she was playing ignorant so that she could hear the full story. This got a slight chuckle out of Izuku before he took a deep breath. Anyway, it happened a few days after the slime villain incident. Chapter end notes I did say you were gonna hate me. XD this, ladies, gentlemen and those of unspecified gender, is the sort of cliffhanger that Cobalt Star readers are familiar with and resent so much. XD meanwhile, take great delight in throwing M at you. Also, reserve some brain cells to remember Maria and Oscar here. There's gonna be a subplot later involving these two. A few things happen in the next chapter, but the part you guys really want to see is the flashback showing what happened that resulted in Izuku losing his arm. Until next time. History and Progress Chapter Notes Mblarg, it's me. I know, I released a chapter yesterday, but I was really motivated to get this one out to you. It's gonna be on the short side, but around half the chapter is the flashback you all been waiting to see. I think this might be the angstiest chapter of the entire FIC. Maybe. Most likely. And speaking of the flashback. Trigger warning. The flashback will have blood and things will go flying. It is not too explicit, but Izuku does notice details about everything. Also, reading the comments from the previous chapter, I seriously wonder how all of you missed the big hint about the incident that night I dropped back in chapter 5. XD well, read on. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Izuku walked down the street in a slump. It had been 3 days since the incident with the slime villain. 3 days since he saved Kaken, only to be reprimanded by the heroes, then berated by Kaken for his deed. 3 days since All Might himself told him he couldn't be a hero. Ever since that day, Izuku felt empty. Being a hero was the only thing he'd ever wanted to be. Now, after literally everyone told him no, he had no idea what to do with himself. He still carried his hero analysis book, but he hadn't opened it for days. It almost felt pointless too, now. He just wanted to help people, but how could he when no one would let him? How could he make some impact on this world, make people feel better, if even heroes yelled at him for helping? Why did everyone think quirkless meant worthless? He was shaken from his thoughts when he felt the familiar reverberation of an explosion, heard the familiar bang. He turned towards the source and saw a familiar sight. There was Kaken, standing as haughty as ever with his friends. On the ground in front of him was a girl from their school. He recognized her as Aiko, a girl he shared an art class with. He remembered she had mentioned she wanted to enter UA, but only because of their art program. It looked like Kaken didn't care, he wanted to be the only student from their school to enter. He was saying something to her, definitely something insulting, while popping his quirk in her face. Izuku felt his chest heat up. The heroes all praised Kaken. They were saying something like him could be a hero. Izuku was told to be realistic, while someone like him was a shoo-in for heroics. Someone who used their quirk to hurt and demean innocent people. No, that was not right. It wasn't right at all. He wasn't a hero. Kaken was never heroic. Kaken was a... Once again, Izuku found himself moving without thinking, rushing towards the group of students. Bakugo sneered as he shot his right hand out, intent on burning Aiko's face, but caught Izuku by the arm instead. Izuku had thrown himself between the bullies and the girl. Said bullies were surprised and stopped moving for a few seconds, long enough for Aiko to get away. Deku, Bakugo growled, "What the hell dash, shut up," Izuku growled. That surprised Bakugo again, whose face twisted in anger. "What did you say you little dash, you heard me, Bakugo. I'm done letting you walk all over everyone just because you have a quirk. I'm done being afraid of you just because you think you're so awesome when you're not." Deku. Bakugo growled more. Izuku felt Bakugo burning his arm, but he didn't care anymore. For once in his life, Izuku was angry and he was gonna let it out. Heroes are supposed to be supportive. Uplifting. Heroes use their quirks to make people feel better. Shut up, you dash, you only use your quirk to hurt people. To destroy their possessions. To make yourself look powerful. Izuku had tears in his eyes, feeling everything all at once. All his sorrow, all his anger, all his pain, but he didn't stop. Not even though Bakugo was glaring at him angrier than Izuku had ever seen him before. You've never used your quirk for a single heroic thing in your entire life. Deku dash, don't you get it, Bakugo? Are you so egotistical that you can't see it? Shut the foo dash, you're more like a villain than a hero. And then everything exploded. The minute Izuku finished his sentence, there was a loud boom and his vision turned white. He felt searing pain in his left arm as the force of the explosion sent him flying. He felt himself bounce off a hard surface once or thrice before rolling to a stop. There was loud ringing in his ears, and he had trouble opening his left eye. What little bit he could see through his left eye was spotty and milky. His body ached all over, but curiously most of his left arm seemed numb. Lying there for who knows how long, he finally realized he had landed on his chest, his face against the pavement. Groaning and crying in pain, he tried to push himself up only to stumble to his left. His stupid numb arm must have buckled. He needed to get up though. He must have landed in the street, he needed to get up before a car hit him. He slowly pushed himself to his knees with his right arm. Why wasn't his left arm cooperating? Come to think of it, sounds on his left side seemed a bit muted, too. He slowly lifted his head, trying to get his bearings, but froze. Lying on the ground, mere meters away, was a severed arm. Izuku gasped and it finally sunk in. There was a left arm. It was just lying there, blood pooling around the severed side. Where did it come from? Was someone else caught in Bakugo's explosion? Oh god, did he actually kill someone this time? As he kept staring, Izuku saw the buttons on the cuff of the sleeve around the arm. He recognized the design on them as belonging to Aldera, like him. Were there any other students nearby? Izuku remembered Bakugo's bully friends, but neither of them were wearing their coats. Was there someone else? He looked around best he could, still dazed and mostly deaf from the explosion, but he couldn't see anyone else. The next time he looked at the arm, he noticed something. There was a watch on its wrist. Though it was cracked, he recognized it as a special limited edition All Might watch. There were only 500 ever made, with 100 distributed to 5 stores across Japan. Izuku remembered how he had gotten up before sunrise to get in line for one. He was one of 100 people in Mustafu to have gotten that watch. And he knew for a fact he was the only one in Aldera to get it. Izuku gave a pained gasp at the indication. Did that mean, no, it couldn't be. He turned his head to his left, not noticing the shouts from his right. He moved slowly, not wanting to see what may have been there. Or rather, what may not have been there. He felt someone grab his right shoulder and shake him softly, trying to get his attention, but Izuku was focused on what he saw when he finally looked at his left shoulder. It was gone. His arm was gone. There was a stump in its place, slowly dripping blood from what veins hadn't been cauterized shut by the heat of the explosion. The flesh was uneven and looked like a burnt steak. Izuku gave a quiet gasp when he noticed he could see a bit of bone poking out from the middle. It was his bone. That was his blood. It was gone. He kept staring at his bloody stump, completely oblivious to any pain. Whoever came to check on him was now carrying him and his severed arm away from the scene. Said individual yelled something to someone else before whispering something to Izuku, trying to get the boy to respond. Izuku didn't respond except to slowly grab his stump with his right hand. It was gone. The person carried Izuku into a bright building, his right eye wincing from the sudden light while his still kinda blind left eye remained focused on his stump. The person set him down on something soft and he heard other voices. He couldn't catch what they said. He didn't even realize they were there until someone gently pulled his hand away from his stump. It was gone. His arm was gone. His arm was gone. Izuku gripped his stump again. The pain came flooding back, and Izuku screamed. It was a scream of complete agony. A scream of horror and loss. The scream of a destroyed child. Izuku stopped to take a few breaths. It had been a year, but it was still exhausting and painful to remember that day. As he breathed, he looked around to his audience, students of Class 1C with a handful from 1A along with May and Melissa. Every single one was dead silent. Even the students who weren't part of the audience seemed muted. He spotted a few people, such as Melissa and Uraraka, were outright crying. May had a look of absolute fury. She was the only one who knew the name of the culprit, and Izuku could only hope she wouldn't commit murder after lunch. See continuing, he breathed as he rubbed his left shoulder. I later learned that it was KK Kamui Woods who carried me to the clinic. The doctor there was able to use his Q quirk to repair my eye and ears. He also lessened the burn scars around my head, and now they're kinda hard to see under my hair. He couldn't fix your arm, though, Tabata stated. And nope, Izuku sighed. The heat from the explosion cauterized the wound too much for him to reattach it. The only quirk doctors who would have needed to operate within a certain time limit, and they were too far away to help. In the end, it was decided that the stump would be amputated. What happened after that? Sakai asked from his spot on the floor next to Izuku. Did the douchebag get punished? After chuckling at how the snake used that word, Izuku continued, he was sent to juvenile detention for a few months. Since this was a first-time offense on a spotless R record, he got off easy. Spotless? Kakushu scoffed. He blew your frickin' arm off. Didn't your school do anything? Choji asked from behind Melissa. They moved me to a different class. Even after that, the principal and teachers were intent on getting him into UA, and didn't want me distracting him. Several students exclaimed their displeasure at this, getting loud before Izuku raised his hand. It's alright, though. The principal himself barred him from the entrance exam. On top of there was a huge investigation of the school at the end of the year that affected the entire school. What happened at the end of the year? Yoshio asked. Was the school shut down? Please tell me it was shut down. Izuku gave a nervous chuckle. It was obliterated. The Death Star Agency investigated the school due to rumors of discrimination and corruption. I was called to testify about the quirkless discrimination going on there. As a result, more than half the teachers lost their teaching licenses, and most of them went to jail, too. The remaining teachers resigned, and the school was shut down. Though, after what Principal Nedzu's told me, I wonder if he had a hand in it. Meanwhile, up in the principal's office, Nedzu gave a sinister chuckle as he eavesdropped on the entire conversation through the cafeteria security cameras, remembering just how delightful it had been to destroy that prejudiced school. Back in the cafeteria, Izuku took a breath and looked back at his friends. Anyway, that's how I lost my arm, and that's why I was so depressed at the start of the year. But things are better now. He smiled with tears in his eyes. I'm in UA. I have all of you, now. I am not alone, anymore. The instant he said this sentence, his entire class cried out and tackled him, wrapping him in a group hug unlike any he had felt before. Izuku thought he could hear Ida from Class 1A shout about being quiet from somewhere else in the room, but he couldn't quite hear him over everyone in his class talking all at once, all saying nice things to him. Melissa and the Class 1A students only watched, not sure they would have been welcome to join in the hug, but they cried all the same. Mei was crying profusely, a mixture of sorrow over what happened to Izuku, and unadulterated rage at what this, Bakugo Katsuki, did to him. She knew Izuku wouldn't like it if she went out hunting for him, but on the off chance she happened to stumble into him somewhere. Well, he was gonna learn the hard way just what happens during a vasectomy. It was the end of the school day. Vlad King was making his rounds to make sure the students had all gone home. As he did, he remembered this past afternoon. His class finally got to me. That quirk specialist Nedzu had told them about, and was shocked to see it was a one-armed quirkless kid from Gen Ed. Even more surprising was that his class had apparently run into him before lunch, assumed he was from Class 1A, and thought he lost his arm during the USJ incident. He had to admit, it was pretty funny watching everyone's reactions to him explaining that part. As he stepped outside, he heard a rumble from around the corner. Too loud to be a custodian. Vlad decided to investigate. Before he even turned the corner, though, a large foot stomped into the ground mere meters away. Looking up, he saw it belonged to a really tall UA student. She seemed to be trying to catch a particularly fat student who was somehow around 3 meters above the ground. Said student was also somehow flattening and expanding himself over and over to avoid her grip. Vlad was about to intervene, assuming this was a fight, until he noticed there were more students in the field. He saw one stocky boy with spikes on his back and arms dodging a large snake in a uniform as it seemed to fly at him from different directions. Towards the far end of the field was a really hairy student throwing boulders at the barriers erected by another student. What was going on? Thankfully, he received his answer when he turned his head a bit more and saw a group of students huddled in the corner. He noticed they were talking to the quirk specialist from earlier, and Aizawa was leaning over him, looking at whatever was in the kid's hand. He began to walk towards the group, but stopped when he saw Aizawa had noticed him and started jogging his direction. What's going on here? Vlad asked as Eraserhead approached. Class 1C is using the field, Aizawa replied. The sports festival is in 2 weeks, and Midoriya's class wants to do good in it. They're gonna be using the field to practice quirks and tactics. Vlad was initially gonna ask just how good they'd be, considering they weren't hero course, but then he remembered that it was Class 1C who came to support the hero kids during the USJ incident. They had been strong enough to fight villains, even without any form of hero training. Maybe they could get pretty far. Especially that, wait. Didn't Class 1C have a girl with an ice quirk? She left earlier, Aizawa replied. Said she had something that needed doing. Moriboshi sat at the base of a tree, wearing a casual outfit. Said tree was in a secluded area just outside of town, away from any potential prying eyes. Normally she didn't come out here, but she was waiting for someone. As said individual approached, she got to her feet and regarded him coolly. I admit, she stated, I was beginning to think this request was a joke. I do not make jokes, Todoroki Shudo said as he approached. I asked you to meet me out here because I have a request, no, a plea, if you will. Moriboshi quirked an eyebrow as Todoroki took a breath. Could you teach me to use ice like you do? She stared at him silently for a while, long enough to make him feel uncomfy. The techniques I know are not things you can half-ass, she finally responded. You would have to put everything you have into mastering them. I understand, Todoroki nodded. That includes your fire side. What? Todoroki's eyes widened. Why would I need to practice my fire side, which I am sworn to never touch, if I wish to master ice techniques? Because your fire side is linked to your ice, Moriboshi said as she walked closer to the hero student. You know Midoriya-kun, right? You know how he studied quirks for years. During his studies, he's learned that dual quirks like yours are a single quirk, rather than 2 separate quirks. You can practice your ice side all you want, but your inexperience with your fire side will weigh you down. Seeing the confusion on his face, Moriboshi sighed, trying to remember how Midoriya had described it to her earlier, before looking back up at Shudo. Your quirk, she explained, is like twin swords. They're both powerful weapons, but only if you use them. If you reject one sword and never use it, not only are you hindering your own combat potential, but leaving that sword on your hip is making dead weight, leaving you off balance at best. You're refusing to use your fire side because your sperm donor is Endeavor, right? While any anger you feel towards him is undoubtedly justified, not using your fire quirk because of him is like refusing to use a sword just because someone else has a sword just like it. You can't do that and expect to win many fights, because you can bet villains will use every weapon they have. She turned and started walking away, leaving Todoroki to contemplate her words, before stopping and turning back to him. Use your fire, Todoroki. Once you can do that, I'll teach you what's safe for you to learn. She took a few more steps. Wait, he called out. What do you mean, what's safe for me to learn? You'll see in 2 weeks. She continued walking after this. She did want to teach him, to help him, but she couldn't do that before he learned to accept himself. All of himself. Chapter end notes. There you have it. The day Izuku lost his arm. I really got nothing to finalize it with. Just hope it made a few of you feel sad, cause if you can get your readers to really feel emotional, you done something right. Next chapter will take some time to release. Now that it's August, I need to focus on Cobalt Star to get this month's chapter released. Till next time. Progress and presentation chapter notes. You know how some manga have chapters that are entirely silent and dedicated to training montages? This is like that, but has some important stuff to pay attention to. See the end of the chapter for more notes. 2 weeks until the festival. It was Saturday morning, and Class 1C was out in the UA field. Most of them were practicing their quirks, working to make them stronger and more effective. A few students were off to the side. Oscar, Sanada, Hojo, and a few others would work their bodies, but they knew their quirks wouldn't help in the long run, so they elected to focus on helping the others in any way they could. This usually came down to helping Oscar prepare refreshments for everyone. Tabata and Yoshio had disappeared to work on something, while Hayashida seemed busy flirting with some upperclassmen. One could guess how successful that was. Amidst all this, Midoriya was sitting on a hill with Aizawa, observing the students who were practicing their quirks. Aizawa was still bandaged like a mummy from the USJ incident, but volunteered to supervise their practice. Is it just me, the pro hero asked, or is the fat one getting faster? That's Kikushu, Izuku clarified, and don't let his G-girth fool you. He's always been fast. Izuku watched as the aforementioned student dodged Sakai repeatedly without even using his quirk. Left, right, left, up, to both student and teacher it was like watching a dancing water balloon. The almost hypnotic routine was interrupted when everyone heard a loud "Kia," followed by Asano face planting the ground at her full height. She had been sparring with Moroboshi, who had dodged a kick and froze the bottom of Asano's shoe, making it very slippery. There was a brief silence before half the students collapsed in laughter. I need some coffee. Aizawa got to his feet. Don't break anything vital while I'm gone. As the mummy instructor hobbled toward the school, Izuku turned his attention to his class. Asano had gotten back up and was doing post-exercise stretches before shrinking back down to her normal size. Oh, a voice shouted from the direction of the school. Turning to the newcomer, Izuku and the others saw Tabata and Yoshio running up. Hey guys! Tabata hollered, waving a thick brown folder over his head. We got it. 12 days until the festival. Izuku gave a pained grunt as he hit the padded floor of the school dojo for the 17th time that afternoon. Sir Night-Eye had just demonstrated a masterful judo flip with the kid without breaking a sweat. After so many flips, Izuku was sore all over, but it wasn't the sort of soreness he was suffered in middle school. This was the soreness of training, not the soreness of bullying, so it was marginally nicer. Too slow, the tall hero pointed out. You're getting better, but you need to get better faster, young man. Sorry, Izuku whined a bit as he got to his feet. He barely straightened up before having to duck under Night-Eye's roundhouse kick. He shot forward and tried to kick the back of Night-Eye's knee before he could regain his footing from the quirk, but narrowly missed as the hero simply jumped using that leg before bringing his other leg back down to knock Izuku back into the mats. There was another grunt of pain from Izuku, but a smile from Night-Eye. There you go, he acknowledged as he helped Midoriya back up. I remember a few days back you tried to counter that with a punch. You've learned to aim for a possible weak point, and that will be vital for you, young Midoriya. You're small so you can't overpower your foe, but every foe has an opening that can be exploited. You're good at analyzing, so work on using those skills to spot openings and weaknesses on the fly, got it? With a determined nod from the smaller boy, Night-Eye smiled again and ruffled his hair. Midoriya was determined, focused and a quick learner. All Might definitely made a mistake letting this kid go. Ahem. Principal Nedzu called out as he entered the room. Izuku and Night-Eye turned and saw he was dragging a tea cart into the room with his tail. I believe it is time for a tea break. Need to replenish that sugar after eating mats all afternoon. Both humans laughed at the principal's joke as they took him up on the offer. Izuku accepted a cup and took a calm sip, giving a content sigh at the flavor. Night-Eye took a sip and his eyes widened. Principal, he gasped, this tea is amazing. Midoriya's mother gave it to me, the rat-slash-bear-slash-thing chuckled. Family recipe. She won't tell me how to make it myself. This elicited a chuckle from all three as they took another sip of the divine tea. 10 days until the festival. On Wednesday afternoon, Izuku found himself in the support course workshop. Due to his close friendship with Mei, said workshop was a very familiar and comforting place for him. Unfortunately, he found himself in a very unfamiliar and uncomfortable position as he was sandwiched between Melissa and Mei at a nearby work table. He was happy the girls were focused on what was on the table, or else they'd see his face redder than Mei's hair. Here's what we got planned, Mei smiled as she unrolled a blueprint. Izuku looked down at the paper and gawked at what he saw. This is gonna be your new arm, Mito-chan. It'll be powered by more red matter, crafted by yours truly, so there's no way it'll run out of power before we make an upgraded version. It's made of a heat-resistant alloy, Melissa explained, and built with shock-absorbent struts, making it pretty durable against explosions. The implant on your shoulder will be made from the same material. With that implant, it'll plug into your shoulder directly and perfectly, leaving no room for anything to get wedged. The palm and fingers will have a special nerve-connected padding so you can actually feel when you're holding something. It'll also give some manner of temperature detection, but you won't actually feel burned or chilled. Before any of that, though, Mei continued as she pulled a big box over, there's something you gotta do. She quickly opened the box and pulled out the contents. Izuku gasped as he saw it was another prosthetic arm, but it looked very little like what was on paper. It was skinnier, and looked like it was made of pewter. This is a beta arm Mel and I made earlier. After you get surgery done this weekend, this'll help you get used to having two arms again. It has the same nerve padding, and is made of similar materials, but is nowhere near as durable. Think of it as training wheels for your shoulder. Mei gave a chuckle. You'll be able to put your desks on by yourself after this. Kinda gonna miss helping you with that. And maybe I should ask you for help, anyways, if that's how you feel, Izuku joked. Both girls laughed at this remark. Mei put the beta arm back in its box and dashed off to check something in the next room over, leaving Izuku and Melissa alone. Izuku turned to look at the third-year girl, taking in the beauty that just permeated off her. He'd known her less than a week, but he felt it was now or never. Shield-san, he asked, I was wondering if you were gonna be busy tonight. I was actually about to ask you the same thing, Melissa smiled as she put the blueprints into a poster tube. I'd like to talk to you more about your arm, see what sort of accessories you'd like us to install. Oh. Izuku vocalized his surprise. And not busy at all. We can talk tonight. He gave a nervous chuckle, feeling like he lost his chance. Excellent, the taller inventor patted his shoulder. We can talk about it over dinner. Your mother recommended a good restaurant not too far from the school. Does 7 sound good? 9 days until the festival. Wait, Oscar asked as he and Izuku exited the classroom for lunch. Are Chu saying she asked you out to dinner last night? I was surprised, too, Izuku nodded. I mean, I was gonna ask her, but I didn't think she'd take charge like that. Was it a good dinner? Absolutely. We talked about my new arm, and Midoriya-kun. Both boys turned and saw Momo running up. Izuku was a bit surprised to see her in this part of the school before lunch, and Oscar had never seen her, so he didn't know what to expect. Midoriya-kun, I was wondering if. Her gaze fell on Oscar, who suddenly felt nervous. Who is? Oh, Midoriya gestured with his hand, this is my classmate, Oscar M. Mauskowitz. He's a nice guy, he can climb walls and, wait, off track. What was it you needed? Momo stared at Oscar for a few more moments before shaking her head and looking back at Izuku. I wanted to ask if you knew where Ectoplasm-sensei was. He wasn't in his classroom. Oh, he's down in the SS second gym with Vlad King. Izuku stuttered. Momo nodded her thanks and glanced at Oscar one more time before dashing off. The two boys watched her go. Did I do something wrong? Oscar asked. She kept looking at me. Maybe she thinks you're cute. Oscar gave a chuckle at the inconceivable notion and the two boys started walking towards the cafeteria. 8 days until the festival Friday night. It was time. Izuku lay on a padded operating table in Recovery Girl's personal clinic on UA campus. His mother was there, as were Midnight, Nedzu, Melissa and Mei. Mei was carrying the black box that Izuku had seen a few days prior. Inside that box was the first step to regaining what he had lost. No. He could never regain what was lost. His arm. His innocence. His best friend. He couldn't get back any of those. What this was. It was the next step to moving beyond his past. Are you comfy, child? Recovery Girl asked as she lifted the table just a bit. You're gonna be here a while, so I want to make sure you won't be hurting when we're done. I am fine, sensei, Izuku smiled. I might fall asleep before we even begin. This got a chuckle out of everyone present. We're gonna put you under, now, Chio explained. With how late it is and how long this could take, I wouldn't be surprised if you slept until morning. We're going to attach the nerves in your shoulder to the implant as it goes in. That'll let you move the arm like you used to, but don't feel bad if things don't work perfectly immediately. You've been without an arm over a year, after all. Ready? Izuku didn't answer immediately. He looked at everyone present, gave a genuinely happy smile, and nodded. I'm ready. 6 days until the festival. Class 1C was abuzz with excitement. It was Monday morning, and the sports festival was that Saturday. It almost felt like a holiday was just around the corner, and these kids were eager for its arrival. We're gonna nuke the festival. Gakushu cheered. I bet no one will expect us to get past the first event, but we're gonna take home the gold. Maybe Chu will, Oscar said as he munched on a cinnamon roll, but the rest of us will be lucky to just squeak by. Dude, Sakai groaned, you really need to think of better mouse puns. Say, anyone seen Midoriya? Kagero asked as she preened her wings. I tried to call him over the weekend, but his mom picked up and said he was busy. Wonder what he was busy with, Choji stated. When Choji finished, the doors opened and Midnight stepped into the room. Everyone turned to her expectantly, but were met with a silent glower from Midnight. After a few moments, her glower turned to a smile and she stepped aside. Midoriya stepped in behind her, his bag over his shoulder like normal. He took a single step inside before turning to the class. Without saying a word, he smiled and waved at his classmates with his hand. His left hand. The gears in the metal prosthetic whirred as he moved the elbow, and clicks were heard as he moved his fingers. It was slow and somewhat clunky, but Izuku now had a left arm. The class stared in shock for several seconds before they all screamed in excitement. A few even leaped from their seats to glomp the small boy, so happy they were to see him like this. Midnight giggled at the display of affection, deciding the class would be fine if she let them express it for a minute or two. For days until the festival, it's official, Yoshio stated Wednesday afternoon, Asano's definitely gotten taller. Said student was standing at her full size next to a wall, with Hojo standing atop a ladder holding a tape measure. 4.75 meters, she called out. Over a full meter in under 2 weeks, Tabata said. Wonder why it's going so fast. Quirks are like muscles, Gorogoro said as he did stretches next to his classmate. Asano probably never stretched her tall time to its limit before coming here. This keeps up, she could become the next MP lady before her 3rd year. You could not pay me to wear a leotard like hers, Asano grimaced. There were a few moments' silence before she glared at Tabata. Stop thinking it. At the same time Asano was getting measured, Moroboshi was working on her ice with Izuku. He observed as she made intricate pillars and small weapons. He watched as she conjured a shield of ice, then converted it to snow. Heard from a teacher you won't be participating in the festival, Moroboshi asked as she made a helmet from ice. That true, Mito-kun? UNFF. Fortunately, Izuku nodded as he scratched his head with his right arm. Due to my disability, I am ineligible for the competition. Don't worry, though, I am still gonna be doing something cool. Moroboshi shrugged and worked on more ice constructs. Hey, why you can lift things with your ice while it's F-forming, right? Gotta be careful when I do, though, Moroboshi admitted. If I try something too heavy, the ice'll break once the construction is finished. Could only lift it while the ice is forming. As she continued, Izuku got a contemplative look. Suddenly his eyes widened and he turned towards the other group. Gorogoro-kun. Oh, over here, please. 2 days until the festival. Class 1A was exhausted. They had spent the afternoon doing a rigorous series of exerci.